Greetings, everyone. I didn't think I'd be making another book of travels video. It's been many years since the last time I actually did a pre-recorded, edited, planned out video like this. I did do a live stream a few weeks ago as sort of a retrospective because the game was discontinued and it was turned into a single-player game. Just a couple weeks ago, for those of you that don't know, and they patched the game to make it accessible without accounts or use of servers or anything like that. And they also gave us all the blessing to go ahead and mod their game, which I'm very grateful that they did this. So I got to thinking a lot about modding and what are some things that I could do to contribute to extending the life of this game and showing my appreciation for it. So I thought, well, my background is in a lot of different weird things, but I really enjoy 3D modeling and using Blender. So I looked around and there's a few people making some kind of mods here and there. They're mostly more programming oriented things. But this game has a very big following of creative people who are making fan art and things all the time. And I was really eager to try to contribute some of my own 3D assets to the game. So I spent a whole week just looking at the Unity project of this game and pulling files out of it, learning about how the skeletons and the rigs and the meshes and the textures and just how all of this works. And I wanted to put together this character template file here to make it really easy for me and any other 3D artists or people looking to get into anyone like that interested in 3D and Book of Travels, to make it really easy for you to browse a lot of the files and potentially bring them back into the game sometime in the near future. Now, I do want to have a big disclaimer about all of this, is that as of the making of this video, we currently don't have an actual method to bringing assets back into the game, but this is a Unity engine-based game, so it's definitely possible. I've seen lots of Unity games modded to bring assets in, but the amount of people modding this game is quite small right now, and we haven't reached the point of knowing how to do that. So this file should be everything that's needed for when that point comes along, when we can actually bring assets in, that everything is all neatly set up here to be able to make things like clothing items, potentially animations, offhand items, weapons, hats, just all kinds of different things related to the human character. And just making renders if you want to, or animations, and I created like custom shaders and all kinds of stuff to try to imitate the way the game looks within Blender. So if we can't currently get stuff into the game, at least you'll be able to make renders and animations in Blender that look like something that belongs in the game. So if you're the type of person that likes to follow along while you're watching someone explain stuff in Blender, the file that I'm working in right now is in the description of the video, and please let me know if that link ever breaks or anything like that. I want to make sure that that is present all the time. And I'm also going to be posting this to the Might and Delight Discord server. They opened up modding channels to help people communicate and to share what kinds of things that they're modding with the game. So I'm also going to have a forum post there, so that if you have any problems with this or questions about anything, even if it's about this or Blender or any of that, you feel free to leave them in my thread about this template on the Might and Delight Discord or in the comments as well. Oh, and I am time stamping this video because I tend to ramble and I tend to make videos that go very long. So if you want to just skip to things that are relevant to what you're interested in, I'm also time stamping sections of the video, and I'm going to do my best to try to group relevant things together if you just want to skip around and learn how to do specific tasks using this file. So before we begin, I just want to show a few examples of things that I've made so far using the assets in the game. I did not make any of these models, these are from the game, but I did make a custom shader and rig and brought it into Blender, and I posed some of these characters and made some animations, and I came up with my own kind of approximation of cloth physics. Here you can see how the clothing moves to the wind. Wind is a very important theme in Book of Travels, so I think like having clothing blow around is an important aspect of making the game feel, or making a fan art feel like it belongs in this world. And it's not actually using any physics. I came up with kind of an interesting use of displacements and weighted vertex groups and things like that. And it might actually be more performant than what they use in the actual game, maybe. Another disclaimer is that all the assets in this file belong to Might and Delight, the studio that created this game. And I highly suggest that if you're going to be using this file and using these assets and stuff for your own fan art and all that, to purchase the game first. It's only $5 now on Steam, and you can support the developers of this beautiful little game. And do not attempt to sell any of these things. You know, they're property of this development team. We're just here to learn and to make fan art and to keep everything contained within the proximity of the Book of Travels game. So I suggest just only using these assets if you've purchased the game and also are just going to be making fan art or potentially modding the game as well. Okay, so Blender. So when you open this file for the first time, this is what it should look like. And I want to anticipate a few potential issues that you might be having right off the bat. Is that the version of Blender that I'm using, look in the bottom right corner, is version 5.1.2. Now, I don't think you're going to need this exact version, because I don't actually utilize much of any of the features that are unique to the newer versions of Blender. I wouldn't go any older than anything older than version 4. So if you have like 4 point something, 5 point something, that should be fine. It's going to warn you no matter what if the version's wrong, but I'm quite confident you're not going to actually lose anything as long as you're using or miss out on anything, as long as you have a version that is 4.0 or newer. You also might get some warnings about not having certain extensions or plugins, because I do have a lot of extensions. Speaking of which, I should turn this on so that you can see all the keyboard commands that I'm using. But I also have things like Rococo motion capture and some VR plugins, some VR chat things, and some like texture atlasing things. And it might warn you saying like, oh, this version was, or this file used these things and you don't have them. You can ignore all that. We're not using any custom functionality to utilize this file. I kept everything very basic and standard Blender and streamlined, so it shouldn't have any issues with that. Something that I suggest to everyone, whether you're experienced at using Blender or you're really new to it, is I always suggest that people enable the search feature and move it to the spacebar. Now, this feature is incredibly useful because it allows really visual learners such as myself to have a more, I don't know, like tactile visual way to access the majority of the features of this program, because Blender has a bad reputation for being a shortcut-oriented program, and it's very intimidating for people because they're like, oh, I don't want to have to memorize 100 different shortcuts just to use this program. I've been using Blender for longer than I can remember now, and I only use maybe 10 to 15 keyboard shortcuts on a regular basis, and everything else I use the search feature. So for example, if I wanted to just add a cube, I would just type the word cube and then click here. So that way I didn't actually have to go and like, okay, how do I add a cube again? Do I go to add, mesh, and cube, or to dig through different things to find features? Just imagine in your mind what you want to do. It could be like, I want to add a cylinder to the scene. I click it, and there you go. There's a cylinder. So it is very nice features. And in order to do this, to enable it, because by default, for some stupid reason, they moved it to F3, which is really out of the way and not handy, but I like it to be moved to spacebar. So to move it to spacebar, go to Edit, and go to Preferences, and for you to see this, I have to click over here and go to here. There we go. Go to Preferences and go to Key Map. Spacebar action, turn it to search. I think by default it's going to be play, but search I think is a much more valuable thing. And this is just, I want this feature present in all programs now. It's just so incredibly useful. And I'm going to be using this throughout the video as well. And also a cool thing is that it keeps track of everything that you've recently done. So if you're doing a really repetitive task, you're like, okay, I'm going to be doing a lot of adding of cubes for some reason. You don't even have to keep typing that anymore. You can just click and it will go and add the things that you've recently done. So it breaks down the amount of repetition that you have to do. And finally, it shows all of the shortcuts for these things on the right side. So you can kind of be on your road to learning the shortcuts while you're using the search feature. So just remember, you can push spacebar to bring this up. Next important thing to know about Blender, and even experienced people a lot of times don't realize this exists, are these things at the top that are called workspaces. These are different organizations of the screen that make it easier for you to perform a certain task. So right now we're using layout. And layout is used, as it sounds, just for the general positioning of everything. It's usually the biggest viewport to work with, and is one that I spend the most time in. But then you go and like click on shading. Now this brings up like the UV editor. This brings up texture viewer and painter technically, and then when we get into it, this is going to be where the material nodes appear down here. And then animation, you can see it brings up things like the graph editor, and you see action editor, and you can turn it to like dope sheet or all the other shape key editors. Things useful for that. And then compositing, which is going to be one of the final steps, and this is how you can overlay a bunch of pieces all to be edited in a certain way or composited to be pushed into the final render. And I've moved all of these workspaces to the left, and we're only going to be using the first 4. And even in more complex projects I've been a part of, I usually only just use a couple of these. And if you're a really advanced user, you know, you can go up here and click these and customize your workspaces however you want. And you can also click in the top right corner. I'm not going to do it because it's kind of, I don't want to mess up the file, but you can click and drag down and divide viewports and make your own workspaces. And you can click the plus here if you want to, you know, add your own. And there's even more that aren't even shown up here right now. Or you can duplicate the current one and customize it further. So right away, what's bothering me is that everything is really gray looking. And Blender does this by default in case you're using a file that is really texture intensive. It defaults to everything being at a low fidelity mode so that the file opens quicker. But this is not going to be a particularly intense file, so I like to turn everything into the viewport shading, the rendered mode. So you look in the top right corner, you're going to click right here, turn it into the rendered mode. Now every viewport has its own instance of things like the menu bar at the top here. So these are actually the same thing for both these viewports. See, it says like object mode, view, select, add, object mode, view, select, add. Now this has the same thing, but you have to click the mouse wheel and drag to see the rest of it. So you can go all the way to the right and click it here as well. And you're probably noticing that if you've used Blender before, you're wondering why is there a checkerboard pattern that probably looks really terrible with the bitrate on the stream or the recording. But the reason the checkerboard is there is because it is used. I set this up to use alpha transparency, meaning that when you export this render, that it's going to have transparency behind it if you save it as a PNG. So it makes it very easy for you to drop in the Photoshop or to just place anywhere. If you just want the character to be there and nothing else. And if you want to turn this off, because it can get a little jarring to be looking at this checker pattern all the time, you're going to want to click over here on the render properties, and you're going to click the mouse wheel to drag down, and then go to film. This is going to be collapse. Go to film and then click transparent, and it'll go back to how you would expect it to look. But remember, you have to click this back on again if you want to utilize this feature. And the next part of the interface that's important to use, and you'll use it a lot, is the outliner, or it's sometimes called like a hierarchy. Just about every 3D modeling program, every game engine, everything has some form of hierarchy. Now this is the structure of all of the things that are in your file. Because there's a lot more that goes into a file than just what you're seeing right here. For example, like this character here, or this rig and this character are all inside the body rig section. So you can see when I click it here, it highlights it up here because that's where it is. But you can also click it here and it will select it there as well. And all of these boxes here are things called collections, which are just organizational things. It just helps you keep everything contained. And it is very important in this file that I use these collections, because you can see right here, this character has 196 meshes attached to it, meaning there's 196 clothing items that were taken out of the game and brought into this file. And then over here, there's 128 hats. And then there is 125 items. And the items are like weapons, offhand things. It's really anything that snaps to a certain bone of the player. And I'll explain more about that into the future. So using this hierarchy is a very important thing. And you can also search for certain things. And I'll get a little bit more into this later. But for example, like if we look at all of the clothing items, you'll see that there's a ton of things that are disabled right now. And if I click the eye on any one of these, I can turn off the overlay if you don't like the look of all the bones and things there. You can bring it up close. When you click the eye, it'll enable the various clothing items. And, but because you see that there's a lot of these things, let's say that you only wanted things that are oriented towards let's say mystic stuff. So you could go up here and type mystic, and then now it's going to be a little confusing, but you're going to look for anything that has the closed eye, meaning that it's possible to show it. And now you can look at any mystic oriented things without having to do a lot of extra scrolling. So there is the ability to search, and I wouldn't mess too much with this, but you can also, if you know what you're doing, you can enable filtering and things as well over here. And just to show really efficient use of all of this, that you don't have to use this view. Like I left the hierarchy for the layout view as comprehensive as possible, just so you're seeing everything. But if you want things to be a little more trimmed down and only show what you are currently working with, like for example, what if I just wanted to make bandit outfit? Let's see, where is it? Let's turn this on and then just turn that for the bandit, and then also let's do these like leg pad things. So instead of having to be like, oh, I gotta click through all of this to find all these items again, that if you go to the shading workspace, and again, click this up in the corner to make this as you expect it, and you can resize things as you need to. I split the hierarchy into two different versions up here. So this version is only things that are visible. So if you want to be editing, for example, like the materials of things that are visible right now, this top one shows only the visible things. And then this view here is, it's all the same stuff, but this is with no collection. So this is a comprehensive list of absolutely everything in this file. This is the equivalent of if you had opened every single folder, every single collection, and now it's just one giant list. And if you don't want to, you can hear my scroll wheel. If you don't want to be doing a lot of this, you can use page up and page down to do really big skips going up and down. Just so you know. Oh, and since we're looking at the hierarchy and where all of these different items are located here, I just want to take a moment to thank whoever at Might and Delight named everything. Like, these are some of the most cleanly and nicely named assets like I've ever seen. I'm so used to when I'm taking assets out of a game or something that everything is named as some really like seemingly arbitrary naming conventions that only mean anything to the people that put it together, and it's like really annoying to work with. But these are named so nicely, I didn't have to change anything. This is just how everything was named by default. So you can see all bandit related things have bandit in the beginning, all guard related things have guard, Malkusu, There's Mystic, Nature Folk. So these are just some very nicely named files. I want to thank whoever at Might and Delight stuck with the naming conventions all the way to the end, and it was just a nice experience navigating everything. Okay, so let's go back to just the nude default character right here, and I want to talk a little bit about this. Thankfully, I learned that every single human character in Book of Travels uses this one base model. And I was getting a bit worried that when we are going to add a custom clothing item that you'd have to make 20 different versions of one item in order to accommodate all the different sizes of bodies and things like that. But as it turns out, they all use this one model, and they do a little bit of like texture tricks and things to allow some customization of this that I'll show you all in a bit here. And then they also just do scaling of things. And I learned that they proportionately scale. So for example, Malku Su, the really tall people, are just scaled proportionally up like this, and the Selka are scaled proportionally down. So it makes it very easy that if you're going to make items for different sizes of things, that it's just going to be a simple scaling up and down, and you don't actually have to use different models. The one exception to all of this is the Thicketer form has a very, well, thick reference model, but I changed the clothing to accommodate this regular size, just because a Thicketer isn't actually accessible in the game, even though there is a mod that someone made that you can go in and access it. But that's the only one exception where the body type is a little bit different. But it wouldn't be that hard to change clothing to meet that different size as well. And there is some code in the Unity project related to stuff about changing limb lengths. So there might be some like programmatic scaling of stuff that happens in engine. But as 3D artists, I don't believe we're going to have to worry about any of that because it's all done in the engine. All we have to worry about is just making the one thing fit this one model, and then everything else should be set from there. So let's talk about the pieces that make up customization options for a character. Now, these are not my own naming conventions or groupings. I kept everything how they're referred to in the game files. So let's just go down the line. So first and foremost are these things called control points. Now you shouldn't mess with these at all. When I was pulling the assets out of the game, I was very careful to maintain all of the bones and all the naming of everything and the locations of control points and all this to make sure that when in the future, when we're bringing assets into the game, that there isn't any compatibility problems. I did my best to preserve everything. So the control points are just little points in space. I don't know if you can see it, but it's like this coordinate axes that represent just a point. And this point sticks with the character no matter how they move. And I'll explain how they pose and do all this later. But just to show you that as I move this around, the control points stay the same. Well, they stay attached, I should say. So like when you move the hand around, how that coordinate axes there, the XYZ thing stays with the hand. And then these are the hip attachment points. See, what are they actually called? They're called like, yeah, hip attachment. This is like when you have like a sheathed sword or something. So all of these little points are designated spots where an item can snap to. And I'll explain how to do this in more detail later, but like for example, if you're going to be attaching a weapon to the character and it's just say like, oh, let's just turn on the this one blade. So I'll explain more how to do this later in the video when I'm doing more customization of stuff. But so in order to attach something to a control point, I'm going to the constraints tab here and then doing the child of constraint, because this recreates a sort of like parent-child hierarchy that game objects use in the Unity engine. This is the best approximation of it. And be sure that you have this item selected and you see that the name of the item is right here at the top. So I'm going to want to attach it to a control point, to CTRL, and I want to attach it to the right hand, and then do set inverse and then clear inverse. And it's going to look like that it disappeared, but it's because it's inheriting the scale of the rig, which you don't want. So you unclick the scale, and then that brings it back into the hands of the character, which then at this point you're able to move it on a smaller basis and give it a bit of an offset so that it better aligns with the character. And then because it's parented, it will move around as if it were attached to the character. And this is exactly how it's used in the engine, or very similar to how it operates in the engine as well. But that's the use of the control points in a very simple form. So going next down the line is the body, which is the rig, and it's just one character. So this entire collection is just for this one character, and this is where the rig is stored. You shouldn't ever really need to access this, the actual rig, except when you're posing, but you don't want to be changing anything with the rig, because that's part of the thing when you're modding a game, is that you want to leave all of the original base assets as untouched as possible. And as soon as you start moving, I should say editing bones and things like that, the game engine isn't going to understand what's going on, and it's introducing a lot of potential problems. So yes, you will be posing stuff if you want to make characters in the certain poses and all these kinds of things, but you don't want to be editing this at all. And when I get into the posing section of the video, I'll talk more about this, but just, you never want, when the rig is selected, you never want to be in edit mode. You should always be in pose mode or object mode that you can see up here. And object is just the general mode that you'll be in for the majority of all the time when you're just moving things around and organizing things. And then next in line is hair. So if you want to get really close to the character, I mean, I'm just scrolling the scroll wheel here, and then you can turn the overlays off if you don't want all this other stuff in the way. But this is just where all the hairstyles are. So every character has all the hairstyles, and I'll show you how to change the color once we get to the shading section of all of this. But right now we're just going to be toggling things on and off, so you're not stuck with black hair. It can be literally any color you want. And then there's facial hair as well, and there's some interesting ones that I don't remember ever seeing in the game. Because part of the stylistic choice of all of this is the characters don't have faces, so it's interesting that you have like eyebrows or things added to characters even though they don't have eyes. At least, because if you haven't played the game, normally characters are seen about this far away. So this is kind of why everything looks the way it does, and part of the stylistic choice of things being relatively minimal. But I found that it'd be really charming seeing the characters up close like this, and you can get a lot of some like striking silhouettes and some interesting composition because of this art style this way. And then we get into the hats. Now this isn't literally hats all the time. I mean, I think in this case it might be, but they're utilizing the attachment point that's right here on the top of this control point. And this will be a lot of different hats. And you'll see some hair mixed into here too, because the hair customization was added later into the game, in the game's history. So, you know, there'll be some hair in here, even though you can get this hair through the actual hair customization as well. And you'll see, you know, what these hats belong to with certain characters. But because this is an attachment point oriented thing, and I should point this out, that all these collections, and as parentheses, control point, hat, all of these have to be attached to the character. Because if I put this hat there, and if I were to pose this character, the hat isn't going to move with the character. And that's because this attaches, I mean, this is how the game does it. This wasn't my own choice. It's just how the Unity project handles these things. Hats have to be attached by a control point, which is where we go to, make sure you have the hat selected, and you go to constraints, child of, and then you do CTRL, and then look for hat, set inverse, clear inverse, and then it will look like it disappeared, but that just means you need to turn off scaling. And there's sometimes some weird behavior. Let me see. Oh, there we go. Okay. After you change After you turn the scale off, then click Set and Clear Inverse. I don't entirely know what these do, but generally when something doesn't work, I just try clicking the two of these until they start behaving how I want them to behave. So now you can see when I go back into pose mode that the hat will be attached to the person's head. And you know that you had to do that because in the naming of this it says CTRL hat, which we went through the constraints and then child of, and you're free to just disable this or just like remove it entirely when you don't want to be using this anymore, because it's not good to have just tons and tons of things all constrained to the character at once. You kind of want to limit it down to just what you're using right now. And then we have backpacks, which use the backpack control point that you see right here. And there's quite a few of these, and just like everything else, they're going to appear down here. And they are all going to be, most of these are from the base player form. So let's take form 13. I don't remember exactly which one this is, and I have the numbers that correlate with each forms are in the shading tab, which I'll get into that more detail, but like I have them all listed here where it says, you know, number 1 is veiled, thicketer, this is where all of these are, and I'll explain what all this is when we get to the shading section. But in the code, everything starts numbered from 0 to 19. But in the Unity file, in the assets, they start with 1. So everything is offset by 1, which is really frustrating, depending on which place you're referring to it as. So 13 is the ribboned backpack. So I'm going to go back to layout. So if I wanted to attach this bag, because like as you can see right now, the bag is just sitting on the ground, and if I were to pose the character, the bag is not going to move with it. So click the bag, make sure the name is right here, and then do child of, and actually you should probably just do this first, and then control, and then do back, then clear inverse. And now it snaps its origin to the back control point. So then you can go into here and you can pose character, and it will be attached just how you think it should. It should be attached to one of the spine joints, technically. Okay, so then I'm going to just remove that for now. I want to use that later. Now we have the head section, which is a little deceiving because it's not literally head. It's that all the human characters in the game these are like slots for objects to attach to the character. And in the most general sense, there's head, torso, lower. So 3 interchangeable items that all can attach to the character at the same time, in addition to the control points. So you can have head item, torso item, lower body item, and a hat item, and the backpack, and potentially, you know, left or right hand or left or right hip. But I think, you know, the hands and the hips are all reserved for main items and offhand items. So if we're going to be adding more customization things in the future, you should be thinking in terms of backpack, hat, head, torso, or lower. So for example, even though this is called head, like for Bandit, this is covering a lot more than just the head, which is why I say the term is a little loose. But you look at, like in this case, head is a cape. Capes are often used in that section, and head is used as hair in this case, or it's just used as a hood, or sometimes it is a headpiece. Okay, and then now we move on to torso. Now this is pretty much what it sounds like. It's just whatever things cover the torso, and this includes, a little deceptive, but it includes items that attach to things that are on the torso for the bandit. So armbands, like in this case, to make a bandit character, I would be doing a bandit headpiece and bandit torso piece, but not all of them are like this. Like the beggar clothes, this is a more, you know, traditional use of the torso item slot. An important thing to note about all of this is that anytime you're doing a character that is themed, like you're thinking about like a mystic or a bandit or a beggar, the way the game has decided to do this is they have a piece that's called a foundation piece. Now this is some kind of unifying item that is consistent across all variations of a certain type. So the conductor, all conductors have this foundation piece. And like the mystics have it too. I think it's a better example to use the mystics. I'm going to scroll down to that. The mystic foundation, so all of the mystics have this in common. Then every additional piece is going to be other things like head item or other pieces like this. And we might as well just get into lore, which tends to be more pants-like things, but not always. They're a little loose with the definitions of things. So you look in Mystic, and this is pretty much the rest of the outfit. So this is probably a good fitting here. So these are the pieces of the Mystic clothing, and you can also, click on these items. And if you want to hide them, within Blender, you can push H to hide things, so you don't have to find them here again. So this will also hide the items as well. And notice, if you haven't already, in the bottom right corner, all the keys and things I'm pressing are appearing right here. And then finally, we're back to items. So I showed some of this already, but there's a lot of items and I divided them into this. All items are treated the same in the game, but I decided to sort them by weapons, offhands, tools, and props, just for the sake of finding them, because there's just so many. There's like 160 something. So the game doesn't really refer to these things this way, but I just decided to. But these are the real names in the files. They're like M underscore and then something like that. So this is where you'll find all the things that you can hold. And there's a lot of them. There's like spears, there's swords and staves. And there's a lot of things that I just never saw in the game as well. It's like a unique sword that has like this sort of hooked, almost like knot-like piece on the end. An offhand tends to be the less weapon-oriented things. Like there's these like ropes and knots and tools and non-combative things like canes and branches, umbrellas. Then tools are things I guess technically could be weapons, but these are things that are more used by NPCs, and the player doesn't hold these most of the time. Like there's a broom, there's like a fishing hook, kinds of things. These are, things that I don't think the player normally would ever hold. Farming tools and all that. And then there's just a few props. I guess I only ended up finding one. So this isn't something that a player would normally ever hold, but like an NPC can be found carrying this around. And I think there's even like bowls or things too that I probably forgot to put into the prop folder. And I mean, you're free to reorganize anything into your own folders. I mean, once you download this file, it's your file. Do what you want with it. If you can't ever mess anything up, because you can just go and extract the file from the zip again if you want. And if you want to move things around, you can click and drag and just drop it into a folder or a collection, and then it's there. Example is, this is going to be something a lot further in the video. I don't know if I'll even explain it because it's kind of a complex thing, but this is the example that I use for clothing to be, to artificially blow in the wind. So you can see that this isn't actual physics that are going on here. This is using kind of a displacement map thing, and it loops seamlessly, and I think it looks really nice. But this is all done using displacement maps that are constrained by vertex groups, and then they're animated using a rotating empty cube that does a 360-degree rotation, and then the rotation of the displacement So the offset of displacement is done by the rotation, and that's why it can seamlessly loop, is because it's all offset by a seamless looping rotating cube. That's Blender for you. I think in the actual game they use like real physics, which I think is very intensive, and probably a part of why parts of the game lag pretty bad is because of like physics calculations. I could be wrong, but when I was looking into the files, I saw all kinds of cloth physics rendering that were going on, which are like notoriously intensive things, but this is a very unintensive way to go about this. And then finally we have the custom collection. Now this is where you or me will put all of your own things. So if I'm going to be adding a cube, the cube will go into the custom collection. This is just to separate it from everything else and to keep things clean. It doesn't have to be here, but this is kind of for your own sake, really. So like wherever this cube goes, so if you ever want to just like turn off all of your own items, or turn off all of like, want to hide the character rig for some reason or all of that, you can also just click the entire collection and then a little eyeball to hide everything as well. Alright, so that was using the hierarchy in order to show and hide different things and to put different outfits onto the characters. So let's get into talking a bit more about the textures and the way that things are shaded. So I want to use, let's say, form 3, which 3 is the Murther. So I'm going to look for bag form 3, so that's the backpack for the Murther, and then I'm going to go into the torso and then look for clothes form 3 to turn the clothing on. So these are just the two items that are used on this character. Now this is going to take a little bit to explain about how the textures are used in this game. First of all, I want to attach this to the back. So like we were showing before, is that because backpacks are attached by attachment points, it's just how it works in the game, that you click on it, make sure that its name appears right here, and then do child of constraint. That recreates how Unity attaches items to one another. Turn the scale off because you don't want it to inherit its scale. You only want location and rotation to be attached, and then you're going to do CTRL and then look for back, and then clear inverse, so that way it will snap its origin to the back of the character. So now you'll see everything is properly attached as it should. And so now we're going to take a look at how the textures for everything look. So I'll click on the clothing, and then you go into the shading workspace here in the top. And right away, you'll see when you look at shading is that, let me zoom out a bit here, is that I split up the hierarchy on the side here to two different ones. So these are showing the same things, except they're filtered differently. So instead of having to navigate through all of this and all the collections and everything right here, because I wanted layout to be the most comprehensive outline, but if you go in the shading here, I have this filtered to only show what's visible right now. So as you can see, here, I'll enable the overlay for a second so you can see it. So bag and the character and the clothing, and you can ignore the shadow catching that's just producing the shadow right here. So you only see what's in the scene. But also be aware that as soon as you hide something up here, it's going to immediately remove it because it's no longer visible. So let's just say that I'm like, I want to hide the clothing right now. And then you're like, oh, oops, okay, now it's not even visible here anymore. Well, I also added a second version of the hierarchy here that is everything in one big list instead of split up by collections. And you can search within this list. So just do form 3, and this will bring up everything related to form 3. In that case, it's we have this outfit and the hair, which technically you can't see because the hood is up. And then you can very quickly and easily find things of similar classification, I guess. So what I could do is be like, okay, well, maybe I don't want to do something with form 3 or the Merthyr. What if I just wanted to make a mystical character? So just start typing mystical, and then now this is going to bring up all the mystic stuff. So like we were talking about before, you want foundation is on everything. And then let's just do... now let's just do this lower body, and then let's do this head, or no, like maybe this one or something like that. So maybe this is what I want to work with. So it's just when you're in the shading view, things are a lot more filtered, and I just wanted to provide this feature to make it easier for you to find stuff. But for demonstration purposes, I do actually want to use the form 3. So let's go back to that. So just type form 3, turn on the bag, that, and oops, I accidentally typed 4. 3. Alright, so everything is back to what it was. So this is the custom shader that it just took a lot of time, because I'm not very accustomed to making shaders and things like this, but I think it really stands out well. And if you want to see how everything looks without this shader, like take a look at how this looks right now. By the way, Control Spacebar will maximize a viewport, and then pressing it again will bring it back to normal. I mean, that is a really useful feature. I wonder if I should turn is on. Okay, there we go. Okay, so the shader here that you can see, that it's kind of the closest approximation that I could get to how it looks in Book of Travels. Some of the features of it are the really crisply defined shadows that are on everything, and you can see the shadow in the background. Things are pretty illustrative and flat shaded looking, and I wanted to emphasize the brush strokes of the texture as much as possible without having the shading getting in the way of that. And I also have some subtle, I don't know what it would technically be called. It's like a Fresnel edge shading thing, so you can see. Well, I guess it's more prevalent in like the legs, that there is always a bit of an outline no matter what angle you look at it. And that goes for all clothing items as well. So there's just a little bit of highlighting on the outermost edges. In addition to the shadow definitions, there's going to be some weird jank here and there, unfortunately. But you can also like move the sun around and stuff, and I'll show you how to do that later. But we're going to focus on the textures. So I picked this texture because it's one of the more complex ones, because it uses a feature that's called splat mapping. Like if you click on any of the textures here on the side, that's what these nodes represent. These are sourcing an actual PNG file, and all of these are inside the game's files. If you click on one, you'll see that the things on the side here update to show you what you're looking at. So this is what the actual texture PNG looks like. And then if you look at the UV editor at the top, you can see this is how the UVs are laid out, if you want to see. So this is how the geometry is overlaid onto the textures. And you notice everything is gray. And you're thinking, well, wait a minute, why is it gray here if it's green and red over here? And it's because of something called splat mapping, which is a really cool technique that is a way of masking things out using the RGB channels of a texture. So that you're not literally putting red, green, and blue onto stuff here. You're just using the intrinsic channels that are a part of a raster file, which are red, green, blue, and an alpha channel, and you're using it to mask out certain areas of the texture. So you can use that channel to then color things using the game engine, and I did an approximation of it in Blender, in order to allow for color customization. So you can click on this color. Let me zoom out a bit. You can click on this color and change it to anything you want. You'll notice that it just changes it. So it's not actually changing the texture, it's doing color changes within the code of the game to make these changes happen, and it's overlaying it onto the character. Now I took the values right out of the game of what it's supposed to be, and the funny thing is that there is actually a feature in the game that it was only partially developed and it wasn't completely used, that allows for the character's clothing to change depending on if you were wearing an outfit that has a color listed before it. For example, if you have like a cobalt or a cinnabar or sulfur outfit, that it would actually change the color of your player outfit to match that color. Because they didn't allow clothing swaps in the current state of the game, they were going to allow it just to change color. And there's someone that made a mod for Book of Travels to re-enable that feature. It is a little buggy because it was never fully integrated, but you can download a mod to allow for the changing of color of your outfit depending on if the item that you're wearing had a color prefix on it, kind of thing. But that's why it was developed, and it was just never fully utilized. I mean, there were some not spells that you could forcibly change the color of your outfits that also use this feature as well. But you'll notice that like other clothing items, like from like a bandit or something, for example. Actually, let's just use like the beggar outfit. I mean, it's overlapping, but notice how this one does not have a splat map, and it is just a texture, and it's painted on how you would expect it to be. The colors are painted onto the texture. That means that this cannot be dynamically color changed like the form outfits can. So that's what all of this here is. And then if you really want to, I wouldn't mess with these too much. Like I spent a lot of time balancing this out just right, but I mean, you're free to do what you want. But I exposed these values of the shader if you want to mess with things like the saturation level. So if you put texture saturation back to 0, it'll show colors that are more like the base texture appears as. And then this saturation, this little reduction, is what the lighting and the post-processing of the game does to the texture. So this is how the texture looks, and this is how it will look in-game. I don't know if you can see that difference. So I added this feature so that you can get an idea of how it will look when it's put in-game. And you can mess with these other values as well. This is going to change things about how lighting is calculated onto the textures. And if you ever click on one of the values and you press the backspace key, this will go to the default. So I was sure to put stable default values into everything. So if you ever want to just go crazy and mess with all the things, like, okay, let's do like the multiplier of it. Oh, let's like invert the shadows for some reason or make them really intense. And you're just messing with this and you're like, oh shoot, I think I destroyed this. You can just push backspace while the cursor's hovering over here and revert everything back to the default value without much trouble. So like for example, if you wanted to remove shadows entirely, you can just put the shading factor to 0. So now you'll see that there is no shading on this. And different items with that are all using the same shader can coexist with different values because every item has its own separate shader node that you can adjust independently. But I want everything to be visible, so I'm going to go back and re-enable everything. Well, there is an aspect to all of this that I haven't talked about yet, and that's the way in which the character model, so this is the actual, it's the base character. It has its own custom shader. It is a little daunting to look at first. I'm going to full screen this. So a little trick that they use in this game is that they utilize alpha transparency on the base model a lot. So I'm going to temporarily hide form 3. Let's see, where is it? Yeah, so I'm going to hide this for demonstration purposes again. That before we mess with all these other things, if you just look at what this shader is right now, if you want to, for example, just change the skin color, is that you can go into here and just change these values around, and you can change it to any skin color that you want. I mean, you can make it brighter or darker or anything like that. And it's already set to be pretty high right now. There's actual skin brightness value if things aren't quite reaching the intensity that you're looking for. And again, you can also press backspace while hovering to default 2 values. It's very easy to change the color to something crazy once, and it's very hard to remember what that original more flesh tone was. So I put a default value into there to save you some time. And then this also has the same saturation approximation. Wow, that's a saturation approximation. Wow. In here, once it gets into the game, everything is a little desaturated, but then this is more exactly like what the value is doing, and then this, you know, post-processing appearance. And then you can mess, if you want to, with all these other values of the base character model. So, but this has an additional thing called overlay, and in the game's files it's referred to as skin tight textures. So a little secret of theirs is that a lot of the clothing is just like painted onto the skin of the character, and that's why, like with the bandit, how when we are turning on the bandit outfit, why you're like, okay, why are they just like nude underneath this trench coat kind of thing? It's really creepy. And that's because the bandit uses a lot of spray on or skin tight or overlay textures. And what these giant things here are huge collections of all of the pre-made overlay textures. I decided to be a lot easier to have them all in one big, you know, thing where you just connect the dots, rather than just flooding you with nodes that you have to all connect independently. So in order to utilize the bandits overlay, be sure that you're going to connect both of these dots, not only the word that's a bandit, but also the alpha right underneath it. So if you go overlay color, and then the alpha right below it as well. And then there you go. You'll see this is the overlay that is actually painted onto the base texture that the bandit utilizes. And occasionally, these skin-tight clothing options will also have splats, meaning that they have, you know, color, like dynamic color changing capabilities. And there's actually only 2 instances of this in the whole game that I could find, and that's for Form 1 and Form 7. So in the case that you're using 1 or 7, which I think it's like the Moss Walker, and let's see, 7 is Moss Walker and then 1 is Veiled. They both utilize this, but in the case of that, like let's say I wanted to look like the Moss Walker, I would disconnect these, and then I would look for Mosswalker, and then connect color, and don't forget the alpha, the transparency underneath, and you'll see that like, I don't remember the Mosswalker having gray pants, and that's because the Mosswalker uses its own custom splat file here. So you're going to connect that splat to the overlay, and you see that it's blue. So you're going to connect this color to the blue channel, and then now we're using the Mosswalker's pants color. But that's like the only case in which you would use those 2 things. So you can disconnect those. So let's go back to when we were doing Form 3. So we're going to use the overlay because like right now I notice that they're shoeless, and a majority of the shoes in the game are just painted feet. The illusion has been shattered. So we're going to go into the Merthyr and do overlay color and then overlay alpha, and you'll see the boots that are used by the Merthyr. And then the last little piece of all of this is the alpha mask. So right now, actually I'm gonna have to remove clothing again. Sorry, Merthyr. So right now, the part of the overlay of the Merthyr is that it adds underpants to the character because they're potentially visible from down below, so they wanted them to actually have underwear underneath, which, like, good on you, might and delight as a good detail to think about. But there's a feature that they use to help sculpt the body and prevent it from clipping through different materials, and that's where the alpha mask comes into play here. That's what this up here is. These are masking out pieces of the model. So in the case of the Merthyr, let's go to 3, connect this to alpha mask. And you'll see that they're actually hiding pieces of the body. And this is to prevent things from clipping through. So if I enable this now, actually I should show you how it could potentially look when it's turned off. I mean, this is not the best example of it because the character fits under the clothing pretty well. But like, let's go back into the layout, and let's just say we're doing kind of an more extreme pose. You know, I have a whole section on posing after this. So it's like be moving the arms, and you notice how, like, when the arms go into certain positions, how the skin starts to poke through, or if we're like a bent way over, things start protruding in spots where you don't want it to. And this here probably isn't the best example of it. There's ones where it's way worse. But so that's why we have these overlays here, because you can just go into here and turn on Merthyr overlay, and this is the way the developers intended it to be, is that it hides that part, those parts of the body. Now you're free to use any of these, because if you actually look inside this file, you can push tab and look inside and see where all of these are. You can look at where in the texture things are being masked out. But you could just go down the line and just, like, if for whatever custom thing that you're making, you can just look at, like, how are they utilizing? What are they masking out? Like, one of these, I can't remember which one it is, like, most of the body is hidden. Yeah, like this one. So if you have like a dress or something and your character is bending their legs a lot and the knees keep sticking through the dress, you can just use this overlay to, like, you wouldn't even see the fact that it is sticking through. And funny thing is, this is I should have brought this up earlier, but the game utilizes the same reference model for masculine and feminine characters. So they're all using the same shaped body. And the way in which they make a character look more masculine is by masking out parts of the leg so that the hips don't look quite as wide. So if I search over here and do form, now I'm not going to remember which form this was. I'm doing this live. Looking for character clothes. Okay. It wasn't that one. It's one of these where the character is pretty clearly trying to be masculine. Okay, yeah, this one. So right now, this guy, you can see the butt and the thighs and all that are sticking through, but this is supposed to be a male character. So what they actually did is, this is, what form is this? It's not actually have a... Oh, is it 4? Or which one did I use here? Oh, it is 4. Okay, so let's go back to the character. This is crested. So now we're going to move the crested overlay to mask out the body. Then all of a sudden, instead of making, you know, a masculine character and a feminine character, we'll just, everyone technically uses the feminine one, and then we'll just mask out parts of the feminine qualities so that the character appears more masculine. So that's just an interesting little trick. So if you're making a very clearly masculine character, you may want to use like the crested one, but yeah, you can go and experiment with all of these overlays to do whatever you want. You can even go in and turn them into a ghost. Like you can turn off... Oops, that is not what I wanted to turn off. Okay, I'll have to go remember to turn that on, back on in the other view, but so, you know, the ghost actually uses this sort of thing too, but it uses other shaders and all that, so their skin just doesn't look all like shredded up. It's kind of creepy. that way. I'm going to accidentally disable the shadow, so I'm going to go turn that back on. So there's a shader-oriented thing that I just remembered that would be very important to mention, especially if you're going to get into 3D modeling, is that when you look at a lot of these pieces of the clothing, that you'll notice how thin everything is. And when you go into the actual edit mode, you'll see that these are, in fact, just planes. And if you're aware of how 3D modeling works, is that normally everything has what's called a back face. So in most 3D programs that you would, back faces are not visible. And most game engines work this way by default also. So like if you're looking around this dress, you'll notice that, the back side of the dress is invisible in the back side of clothing items, and anything that's really thin like this, like notice how her veil is just gone entirely when viewed from that angle. But then when you look at it this way, suddenly everything is back again. And the reason for that is Book of Travels uses something called a double-sided shader. So if you're developing assets for Book of Travels, thankfully, you can just make clothing two-dimensional, I guess. It can be as thin as possible, and you don't have to worry about adding additional thickness to the inside, because like usually when you are making clothing for any kind of game, that you have to consider that like, oh, I have to make the interior if parts of it are visible. And it ends up becoming this, kind of pain to have to go through and model the interior of it, especially like when you're, especially like when you're rigging characters, because sometimes the interior can clip with the exterior and cause all kinds of issues like that. But because back faces are shown, I don't have to worry about that at all. So just keep that in mind, that when you're making custom clothing and things like that, that Book of Travels does use a double-sided shader, so you don't have to worry about invisible back faces. So now that we know how to toggle different clothing items on and off, and that we know how to go into shading and how you can edit the existing textures and a little bit about how the shader appears and how you can go in here and use the overlays to mask out certain parts of the body, to change the skin color, and then you can overlay stuff onto the character. Now that you know how to do all that and to use all of these things, let's finally talk about how do you pose these characters. And let's talk about a little bit about rigging. So when I was exporting all of these assets from the game, this is a very common thing, but like rigs will get really messed up. Like they might be intact, but they're just not usable. And that's because as part of the process of when models are exported from the original software, put into a game engine, and then if you are taking assets out of the engine, a lot is stripped away. Like the original artists would have had all kinds of special tools in their project files that make it a lot easier for them to work with everything. Like for example, everything is triangulated. And anyone who's done 3D modeling, you'll know that you generally want to work with quads or like four-sided squares and not all triangles. And this is just part of the thing, is that a game engine triangulates everything, so you lose all of that really nice clean edge flow of quads and it becomes triangles. So that's an example of something that is lost. And I mean, you technically can go in and restore it if you really want to. But another thing that's lost are bone positioning. So let me fully reveal the skeleton to you. So when I go back into here, I use bone collections to hide the bones that you shouldn't be editing, but if you want to see the full skeleton, you can turn them on here. Normally, when this was pulled out of the game, these are all different sizes and facing different directions, and it was like protruding out in sharp angles, and it's just like very ugly. I'll edit it in now over the video so you can see what it looks like when you pull an asset out of the game. So I spent a lot of time trying to restore how the original skeleton looked while still allowing it to keep the same bone naming conventions and everything. Like everything, all these bones still have names like right arm, right forearm, right leg, and all of these things. So that when you are skinning, or when models are attached to a skeleton, the names have to be the same in order for things to move with it. So it's like when I click on this clothing item, for example, these things that are called vertex groups right here. This shows everything that is currently attached. This is just for educational purposes. Like, you don't need to mess with any of this, but so you can see how the vertices, or the little points of the model, are attached to a rig based on heat maps like this. These are called bone weights. This shows, like, for example, the hip bone. These are everything, the more red something is, the hotter color, that is the more influence that bone has over those points on the model. Then as you go down the line, you can see how all of these are attached together. And all of these needed to be preserved. And if you're going to be making custom 3D models, this is something you'll have to think about and how it attaches to it. But luckily there are a lot of things, and I'll talk about it when into the customization section at the end of the video, how you can do a more automated way of doing this if you don't want to manually weight everything. A lot of 3D artists hate the process of bone weights because it can be really tedious and not very clear how it goes. But anyway, what I was just trying to say is that, like, all the little points that make up the model, each one of these has their own value from 0 to 1 of how much influence they have. And all that data needed to be preserved in order for you to be able to move this character around how you want it to be moved. And so now we got the bones underneath, but then there are these things that are called bone controllers. And this is what I added to all of this. Normally, you would only just see the most basic skeleton. It looks kind of like this. But you actually, in order to efficiently pose and animate, you want things that are called controllers that kind of act like strings on a marionette puppet. Like, you look at a marionette puppet and it has all the joints and things that move around, but the thing that the person is holding above the puppet and all the strings that attach it actually allow you to articulate and move things around in a more naturalistic and efficient way. And that's what bone controllers are. All these little cubes and things, they're not bones themselves, they're just little pieces of reference points that allow animators to move things in a more naturalistic way. So to get into the pose mode, you want to click on the skeleton itself, and I'm going to hide these extra bones again, you won't need to worry about them. And then go click up here in the corner and then do pose mode. You'll know you're in pose mode when everything becomes colorful like this. And they're color coordinated for a reason. That's because, like, you know, right arm related stuff is yellow, left arm is green, right leg is red, left leg is blue, and center stuff is purple. And when you move these around, that the most basic things you can do is just to move and rotate, and that's the majority of all the movements that you're going to do. Now there's a few different ways to do this. Most people will tell you to push G. Here, let me enable, I don't know why this turned off again. This back on. Okay, it's down, okay, it's in the corner now. Anyway, the pushing G to move things, like this is the center of gravity, so I'm moving the pelvis around and the rest of the body follows the character around. And this is usually where you want to start. Like when you're posing something, you want to move the largest and the most influential parts of the body, and any animator will tell you that the center of gravity is like the most important movement of the character. It's all, everything else follows wherever your hips go. So, and you can see that the character's doing the little IK dance here because the hands and legs are utilizing a feature that's called inverse kinematics, which is, or IK you might see it referred to as, and it's a method of moving limbs around in a way that is more naturalistic. So for example, if I were to grab the hand, you'll see that the elbow is moving automatically. Even though I'm not telling the elbow to move, it just knows that the human body tends to behave this way. So that's probably what you want to do, and that majority of the time that is what the kind of movement that you want. Now these are called bone targets. So when I move the hand, okay, it puts the hand kind of where you want it to go, but then the elbow points towards the bone target. And then this decides where the elbow will be pointing. So if I wanted to move this, this hand up close by the waist, and then if I wanted the elbow to be more, laying more natural by the waist, I would move it that way. And then if you want to reset the position of anything, like if you don't like this, rather than being like, oh, I gotta, put it back to where it was, you can clear the position. Now this is where the search mode is going to be very useful, is that you'll just type the word clear, and you're going to look for, where is it? Clear, transform all. Or if you want, you can do a just rotation or just location. Like in this case, I'm just going to reset location. So then that will snap back into place. Like if I push A and select everything, and then now I can push spacebar. This is why search is so nice. Go back into here, and then all I have to do is click, and that will reset everything back into the normal pose. So you can just completely mess up this character beyond recognition and just be like, oh my god, I am never going to be able to recover from this pose. And you can just push A, select all, and then clear pose, clear, transform, location. Oh, I rotated also, so let me clear rotation. Okay, so now we are back to normal again. Now if you want to be even more efficient, there's a thing called a favorites menu. When you push Q, these are the things that I regularly use all the time. So this thing called all, sorry, called reset, location, rotation, scaling up to all the default values. So instead of having to go through here, let's say that you wanted to add this to your quick favorites. By default, there's nothing here. So you find something that you use often, like you do clear all. Make sure it's the correct one. And if you get tool tips here to make sure it's the right thing. Instead of left clicking, you're going to right click. And for you, this will say add to quick favorites. So that way you can just push Q and quickly access these things that you use all the time very efficiently. And I definitely recommend looking into that, because one of the biggest deterrents from like getting digital stuff done, especially in Blender or a little intimidating program, is it always feels like there's so many steps to do things, there's so many things to remember. So by using the search feature and using quick menus, there's less to remember and more things that are just intuitive. Okay, so I was showing this basic moving around and all of that, like using shortcuts like G will move. And also, just so you know, I'm right-clicking to cancel that action, so I don't have to commit to movement all the time. I can also right-click to be like, just kidding. Hey, I'm going to do this, just kidding. So I find myself right-clicking a lot if I'm like, oops, not that. So you can use shortcuts to do all these types of movements, but if you look up here, all of this stuff that I'm circling right now, all of these things I use constantly when it comes to posing. I'm going to use it a lot in Blender in general, but it's especially prevalent when using posing because there's lots and lots of just little movements and rotating and all that kind of stuff. And all of these will save you a lot of time. So first thing I want to enable, because this is disabled by default. When you go to Gizmo, Gizmo is like, well, you'll see in a second. This is the Gizmo dropdown, click the arrow, and you want to turn these on. You can turn all three on, get this kind of complex looking, this is a gizmo, this thing that just appeared here. So now this allows you to, instead of pushing G to move around, or R or anything like that, now you can just click and drag these things around. So if you click right on the line, it'll constrain it to a certain axis, so you can get a very precise movement. And you generally want to work with the axes, because you can get things to be extremely distorted very quickly if you just start freehanding everything. I mean, once you get more experience, you can start freehanding stuff more, but this is how you move things precisely. And then the arrows on the outside are movement. This is really important. Like, let's say if I wanted to move the entire character around, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, that you generally don't want to move this character away from this crossing point. You can see these two big lines. It's sitting at the origin point right now. And in game engines, this is especially important that the origin, that the character remains at the 0, 0, 0 coordinates here. So I'm in object mode right now. Like, you don't want to be moving the character like this. I'm right-clicking to undo that movement, just because the game engine gets confused when you have what's called root motion. So instead, make sure you're in pose mode. Like, when you see the colors, you'll know that you're in the right place. If you're moving stuff around, like, for example, you go to edit mode, you're like, this doesn't really look right. Where's the squares? Like, you don't want to be editing this. This is causing permanent changes to the rig, and you do not want to touch this, because it will mess up all future animations. Don't be in edit mode when you're posing things, but go to pose mode to pose things. So anyway, if you want to move the character, click this big cube. This is the root bone that everything is attached to. And now you might be like, oh, I just want to move the character to the left. So, okay, I'll move them to the left. And then you're like, but they're going through the ground now. Then you're like, okay, well, I want to move it really precisely to the left. You're not sure, like, okay, is it underground? You know, it's really annoying when you try to just freehand move it. So that's why when you use these arrows, this is now constrained to that axis so that you can just move it and ensure that it stays perfectly aligned to the ground. And there's a special feature that happens when you disable these so that it's just movement. I wish this was visible all the time, but you can have double axis movement. So now you can click this little blue square, which is going to be the combination of X and Y together. So now we are moving it constrained to the plane. So now it is actually impossible to be floating or going through the ground because it is doing a conjoined movement that is constrained to the plane. And same goes for other things. Like, let's say I only want the character to be moving, like, you know, the camera here on the viewport on the left, I only want them to be moving this way. So you can do it that way as well. Those little squares only appear when you have just one visible and they disappear for some reason. You really shouldn't ever scale when posing. It's very rare you'd ever want to be scaling stuff. Like, I think most of the time, like, if I scale the torso, like, I guess it works, but it's, I don't know, it's kind of, like, I can't think of any time I've ever wanted to do this. I mean, it's funny. Maybe there's some, like, squashes and smears or something that use scale, but I pretty much just always leave scale off just for simplicity's sake. And also, this has been bothering me. I just realized this character has just been, like, topless this whole time, and I think it's because the character is supposed to be using an overlay. So what form is this? This is 5, which is Beckoner. So let's turn on Beckoner's overlay, and then also use Beckoner. Beckoner does not actually have an overlay, unless I'm not seeing it here. Huh. Okay, I guess this is just sort of like a really low-cut dress or something like that. Well, anyway. Oh, I'm using the Merthyr one technically, but I think the character is just normally barefoot all the time, so this is how they're supposed to look. Interesting, okay. Sorry for the little diversion, but... So anyway, we're talking about posing everything. Make sure you see the colors. Make sure you have the rig selected, and you go to pose mode. And then now, when you have these little things on here, this helps you pose things a lot easier and quicker. If you don't want to be pushing R or don't want to be pushing G, you can just do it like right on the character itself. And if you click this white circle, this kind of like slightly transparent sphere, I guess, in the middle, it does a like freehand movement. So this way, this is really useful for like doing head movement. For example, like if I want this character to be looking a certain direction, it can feel a little unnatural if I'm like, okay, you know, slide that way, slide this way, slide this way, and it's just a little unnatural that way. So if you click in the middle, you could just be like, I just want them to look in any of these directions. But technically this is the neck, and you can see the name of the bone, but the head will just be the top part. And you can look around this way. So that's what that does. And then this brings us to another way that you can move things around. Or no, I guess an aspect of how you can move things around is going to be with all the different coordinate axes here. Now this is going to be something that's a little overwhelming to kind of understand what all of this means, but so like in the simplest way, everything moves on its own coordinate systems. Like global is the default. This means that, like, you'll notice that when I was moving the head around, I rotated it down. Wait, like I'll move it to the side and then up again. But this gizmo is aligned in, like, it's not aligned with the movement of the head. It's just aligned in global space. So it's unmoving. So if I go back to normal and then I change this to local, now when I rotate the head, notice how the gizmo is now aligned with the head, how this red line is now perfectly up the middle of the head so that you know what direction it's supposed to be facing, and it's always moving relative to the rest of it, which just allows you to like respect the original alignment of things. And this will be more useful when you're doing stuff like aligning hands with stuff. Because if this was global and you're like, okay, I'm going to put this hand over here and then I'll move it here. Now you're like, okay, I just want to raise the hand relative to the position of the arm, but now you're like, that's not really, okay, wait, now it's rotating this way. Now I have to change axis over to this way, and it's really not what you want to be doing. So when you go into local, and you could just leave it on local. Now, as it moves around, the axis stays aligned to the hand everywhere it goes. So the hand is always going to be moving that way. And also, like, when you're working with very small things, you might notice that the camera gets a little annoying to move around, like how overly sensitive it is. Now, this is a feature that I don't know why this isn't advertised more. This is like a rookie's first problem, to be like, why is it so annoying? Like, I can't zoom in. It's just very frustrating. So what you want to do is to push keypad period or numpad period, and that will reset the focus of the camera to whatever you just clicked. So now you can see that everything is very smooth and everything is orbiting around that object. Then if I zoom out again, notice that it's still focused around the hand. So occasionally you might want to go back, and if you're just doing stuff with the whole character and then you push numpad period, then now it's reset back to the normal thing. Or if you're like, okay, I want to be working on something very close with the head, now we're zoomed in on just the head. And this is very useful for 3D modeling, probably more so than posing. But now this way, everything's rotated in a more natural way just around the head. And I wonder, I've never actually looked it up before. What is that even called? Is it like camera? See, this is why search is useful. You can try to figure out what features are even called. Is it like focus? I mean, I don't know. That's a whole other thing. But anyway, if you don't have a numpad, you might have to find an alternative. But so what I wanted to show then with posing again is that if we go back in the pose mode, and then you're going to move like individual fingers. So now I'm focused right up to the fingers. Normally rigs might have something called a finger curl controller, which is what will allow fingers to all move together. So for example, if I want to make this character grip something, and actually I should do that real quick, is I'm going to give her a thing to hold on to, which, well, how about like a... Sure, I always like to look at this. How about this ring with a bunch of knots attached to it? So if you remember from earlier in the video that the way that you attach this is you click this here, go to constraints, do child of constraint, turn the scale off, and I want to attach this to her right hand and do clear inverse. So now it's going to align its position and rotation to that attachment point by the hand. And also, if this gizmo is getting annoying and in your way, you can just quickly click Show Gizmo, and it will hide everything without removing what your settings were down here. So you can just do that. If you want to hide all the bones and everything too, you can hide click Show Overlays and hide all of that as well. So I want to now align this better with the hand so that it can grip it. Like, first of all, it's not rotated the correct way at all. It should be hanging with gravity. So let me go back into here to turn all this back on again. And I'm going to rotate the item. And now if you want to do more clean increments, like I get into the habit of doing a snap increments like this. If you hold down Control while you rotate, it'll snap into place. And you can see exactly how many degrees you're rotating. If you look just right here, shows you how many degrees are being rotated. So I want to rotate this exactly 180 degrees down. And I want to position it a little bit closer to the hand. So now I'm pushing G, which is the same as doing movement like this. But like, let's say I want to move it a little bit closer to the palm of her hand. Okay, so now then I'm going to go back to my character, and normally you could just manually move the fingers. Like, okay, here's the base of the finger. Well, first of all, they're like mitten hands, so you just have one big finger. Do this and then do this. It's not too big of an issue. It's just kind of a personal preference thing, but you can make them curl at the same time. And this brings us to the pivot point. This is relative to where is a thing going to be rotated. It's a median point by default, like the median or the root of all bones is the head of the bone. So the gizmo is going to be where the current pivot point is. So see how I'm rotating this, and it's pivoting relative to that point. But if I were to select both of these, and I want to rotate both at the same time, they're going to both be stiff, like this. But what if I wanted both of them to rotate at the same time? So they're both still selected, so I'm shift-clicking both of them to individual origin. So now, when I rotate this one, they're both going to rotate at the same time. So now they're curling, and this makes it a little easier to do both at the same time. And then for the thumb, I mean, you have to do a lot of looking at your own hands. Thumb is going to be like way out over here. It always feels like the thumb is being stretched to too much of an extreme, but really it's natural. So I'm going to select all the segments of the thumb because I'm still in individual origins, meaning that they're all going to rotate and they're going to curl together. And just curl everything down. And that'll save time from having to do them all individually. And you can also use this in other places too. Like, what if I wanted the entire spine and head and neck to all curl? Like, by default, median point, it would just move together like this. What if I wanted it to more naturalistically curl? I could select all of them and then do the individual origins, and then now it'll actually curl. You'll shrimp down in a more natural way because they're all technically rotating at the same time relative to their individual origins. And then I don't know if this is a little too complex of a thing, but there's something I personally use a lot called the 3D cursor. That's what this circle, this red and white circle thing at the origin right now is. Anytime I anytime I shift click, it moves this thing around. And this can act as a temporary pivot point. So, let's forget what I think I moved it. Ignore what I'm doing. Cursor to world origin. Okay. So what I want to do, like if I want to move this hand over to the somewhere more natural, notice what happens. Is that I'm moving the hand, and like, okay, I want to move this in front. But the hand is just completely like disjointed because the way that the hand was moving is it's still in its outward position. Like notice how it's not rotating. You could very easily just, move it into where you want it and then remember to rotate the hand to fit what you wanted to do. So you can do that, or you can move the hand relative to a temporary point. That is the 3D cursor. So you can shift and right click where you want the pivot point to be. And let's put it over by put it over here. So now when I rotate the hand, it's going to rotate how the entire arm would move normally. So this allows you to just like put temporary little points, or like you'd say maybe you want our arm to be going over her head like this. Compared to if you were to just move this how it was originally, it would look like this, and it's not keeping it. It's hard to explain. I mean, you can see what I'm doing, but so that you shift and right click to move that to different places, and there's so many different uses for that. And it always annoys me when it's just floating off to the side like that. So I made a quick thing for cursor to world origin to put it back to where it started. So anyway, what if I wanted to put both arms at the same time doing a very similar thing? Because it can be a little annoying to be like, okay, I want both hands to grab this. So like, okay, I guess I'll... oops, I'm going to put this back to medium point. There you go. What if I want to put it back to here, and then I got to go back to here and get this other hand, and then I got to go and align this hand over here, and like doing everything twice can be kind of annoying. So that's where symmetry comes into play. If you look right up here, there's this little butterfly looking icon. If you click symmetry, this means that both hands will move in the same place at the same time. And this can be used for legs as well, and it's really useful for like doing sitting poses and things where you want you want the legs to be doing something together. This works for anything that is symmetrical. So I'm going to rotate both, or I'm going to move both of these with symmetry turned on, put them together. So now I'm only having to worry about this one hand. And then at any time you can turn symmetry off, and then you can move things independently again, just like you were doing before. So now I'm just going to attach this to the other part, and click two of these, do individual origins to make it curl in a little more of a natural way. Rotate the hand a little bit more. Put the thumb outwards. Oops, put it down. Technically, the thumb should probably be like rotated this way and then go down. But the hands and the characters in this world are just so tiny that like you can get away with not having things be perfectly aligned and you'll never notice. All right. And then if you want to hide all the things, you can click and see how it looks. Now be very careful that when you're working with symmetry, I mean, don't be afraid to be turning symmetry on and off, but be aware that because I've broken symmetry with this one hand, that now when I turn symmetry back on, if I were to move this hand, it's going to instantly symmetrize the other one again. Again, I'm right-clicking to cancel that. So now I can be sure to leave symmetry off when you are doing asymmetrical little things, so you avoid that. Now you can move both of these at the same time. And I should have mentioned this in the beginning, but you know, what you're seeing on the left is going to be a preview of the final render, so you can keep an eye on how things are looking in that scene while you're moving everything else. So you can look at how her hands are, and you can see how this is very like naturalistic, how it's moving around. Let's just say she's gonna like hold it down like by her waist here. And then, but I want her to be a little more natural of a pose, and not so stiff looking. So I always, as a kind of a rule of thumb, is that you always want to just sort of loosen the pelvis a little bit. Like no one is sitting in a perfect T pose or A pose at any given time. Like legs are always a little bit bent, and they're always a little bit offset, a little bit angled. Of course, she's wearing a dress, so you're not really going to see this, but like usually people are leaning on one leg a little bit. So let's have her like rotate it a little bit to that side, and then let's put her foot outwards and this other foot, and she's leaning on this foot here. So because she's leaning on it, it's going to be a little bit towards like the middle of the center of gravity. And then feet are almost never pointing straight forward at any given time. So we're going to angle it out a little bit, angle that direction a little bit. And also, you don't want to forget the shoulders. So the shoulders are not normally a part of the bigger rotation of everything. They're their own separate thing. So usually when your hands are, you're letting gravity kind of droop everything down, that shoulders, I'll do this symmetrically, shoulders are going to be drooping down a little bit. Like if you're reaching up for something high, shoulders will be up, or if you're really tense, shoulders will be up. But then this way you kind of want to like slouch a little bit down. And then let's just rotate the body, and I want this to curl, so I'll do individual origins. You can kind of be, I don't know, leaning into it a little bit. And then I'm going to have her head look up, and remember what we did before, where if you click on the white sphere, you can do a more natural, like multi-axis rotation, which is good for making heads face a certain direction. And let's just say that, okay, I like this pose, but I want her entire body to be moving somewhere else. And then that's when you're going to move the root bone, the cube here, and make sure, it says root up here. And this will be very useful to keep this in global. And then you're only going to move at these two axes. Like you don't want her going up and down unless she's like standing on something or is underground or something like that. But to make this easier, remember you can go back here and turn only move on, and then use these little like planar shortcuts. So now she'll only ever be aligned here. So let's say I wanted her to be a little bit off to the side. And I want her to be rotated a little bit inwards. So they're going to rotate this for the big movements of the character. And then let's go back and move her hands around again. I mean, I'm not entirely sure what I'm trying to do with this pose here. She's just kind of, I don't know, showing this off, I guess. Alright, and then you can disable all this to kind of just get a preview this very kind of unnatural, weird, slouchy pose. Oh, and I just remembered a little thing I want to throw in here. If you're someone who doesn't like this type of IK movement, which is all of this stuff where like the hands, where the elbows follow the hands and the knees follow the feet. If you want to pose things in a little more stiff of a way, more of a default movement, like if you're swinging a sword or something, you can temporarily disable all of the IK that allows this to happen. Now, I would only do this if you know what you're doing, because it's easy to kind of get unexpected behavior that can look kind of ugly if you don't do this, or if you do this and don't realize what's going on. But that's why I have these bones hidden. But so you want to go into the rig tab, or the data tab, sorry, of the rig, and then go into extra bones and turn them on. Now these light yellow bones are where the information about the IK is hidden. So this is what is allowing these things to move the way that they're moving. Which reminds me, I should really actually be moving the elbow to make this look more natural. Right, and then the knees also have targets as well, so make her knee point outwards, and this one point this way. Anyway, so when you click on one of these and you see IK, you can temporarily hide these, or you can temporarily have the IK stop influencing a bone. And if you're an animator, you can actually animate the enabling and disabling of the IK, because that allows you to do a whole different set of movements that might not be possible in the other way. So for example, her foot right now, her knee, the rest of her leg follows whatever her foot is doing, which most of the time that's what you want. But let's say you don't want that. So if I disable this, now this isn't going to do anything. Now all of these movements will control her leg. So now the thigh will control, it'll be the reverse. It's called forward kinematics. So while this is called inverse kinematics, forward kinematics is when the biggest bone, or the highest, how do you describe this? The lowest bone in the hierarchy has control over everything else. So instead of the leg following the foot is now following the leg. So if you want that kind of movement, that's how you can do it. And be sure to not delete this, just enable or disable it. So I would leave it on, and I would, hide the extra bone so that you don't accidentally mess with any of these. Because if you're animating anything, you want your animations to only consist of keyframes of these bone controllers, and the controllers are all these like floating cubes. And this little bone here, you might be wondering, is actually it's called a twist or an arm roll bone. You very rarely will need to use this, but this is where, in the event that you're in an extreme rotation, like this is common for swinging swords around and stuff, that there's some positions where you'll do such an extreme rotation that wrists will converge into one point and it will look really painful and unnatural. So this twist bone will allow you to counteract that and return it to a normal state. So you'll very rarely ever need these, but I thought I would leave them in just in case someone out there happens to run into it. Alright, so video's already getting really long. I was expecting it to be very long. So last little thing I'll do with the posing is, what if you want to save this pose? Now, what you need to understand is that every bone, individual bone, even ones that you've not done anything with, every time you move them around, they all have their own individual bits of data that are stored into them. So if you want to save a pose, you want to select every bone, like I pushed A, and even bones that did not do anything, you want to save them all to a pose. And you're going to go to the pose menu, and you're going to say create pose asset. And what this will do And so it'll bring this thing up, and let's just say new pose. You could save this to a library, which that's a whole other complicated thing. It's like an external resources. It's more designed for complex projects, but I do it in current file. So that means that this pose will be stored in this blend file and nowhere else. And you say create. And then down here, you'll notice that this pose is there, and it has a little thumbnail image and everything that it generated based off of the camera here on the left. So let's say that you want to reset this whole pose. So I select everything, and remember what we talked about earlier. It was a clear transform all. Everything will revert back to what it was. So the pose is gone. But when you click on this pose, it will move everything back to where it was again. So a really interesting little side feature that you can use is that you can actually blend between, blending in Blender, blend poses between the current pose and this one. So if you click and let go, it 100% goes into that pose. But let's say you wanted to just have this pose influence, but not fully change it. If I wanted her to only slightly go into that pose, well, you can just do that. And in fact, you can do this for a lot of crazy things. Like, let's say I wanted her to sit down. So I would like move the center of gravity down over here. Let's turn on symmetry. Just to do this very quickly. I mean, this is a very awkward and not very natural looking pose. Okay, well, whatever. We'll just have her doing this. And now she's like over here. And then let's say I save this pose and I go create pose asset. This is going to be pose 2. Now you can blend between these two poses. So now I can go like, okay, I want this one to influence it a little bit. Wait, no, actually I want to go back to influencing this one, but wait. Okay, what if I go back to the T pose and I want her to start sitting down, and then I want her to start standing in this position, but more on the seated position. So it's like you can do this interesting little dynamic thing of blending between poses to get more dynamic poses. Now I'm sure someone more skilled in posing can figure out a more efficient way to use this, but I'm just showing the functionality that this exists, that when you click and drag, you can have them influence each other. And you can also mirror poses too. So like it's useful to kind of go down this list and just look at all the various things that you can do with poses. Like, oh, where is it? See, this is where search is useful. Mirror, or is it reflect? Way to do this. You can right click, brings up its own menu also. Oh, paste flipped pose. Okay, so I'm copying pose and pasting flipped pose. Okay, so that makes her go to the other side. But for the sake of all of this, I'm just going to use this pose, and we're going to move forward, oops, with that pose. So the last thing that I want to demonstrate for posing is how to add a second character or any number of other characters to this scene. So what you don't want to do is to just duplicate this entire thing, because the issue is that this rig contains like 400 different customization options, and you don't want to be, exponentially increasing the amount of models and all these kinds of things that are going into the scene. So what you want to do is to create an instance of just the things that you want to see duplicated. So let's say we wanted to have like an identical clone of this character. So you first and foremost want to make sure that the rig is selected. So you can see it up here under the body collection, character form. And then now whatever outfit they're currently wearing right now, you hold shift and click on those items as well. So I think right now we can kind of do a quick, yeah, it looks like that's everything that I want, but I don't want this item here. So I'm just going to click this and this. And then I'm going to create a linked duplicate, which means that it is a duplication that is still influenced by all the original assets. So if you were to make changes to the way an outfit looks or any number of things to it, that it's still connected to the original character, but you can still pose it differently and do all of that. So like you want to instance or create linked duplicates as often as you can, just for efficiency's sake. So what you would do is type, go space and do duplicate linked. Technically Alt-D is the shortcut to it. And you'll see what happens is, well, right away you can see I forgot to select her body. So we're going to undo that, click her body. Okay, now go back to that, duplicate linked. And then you'll see, all right, this looks like everything that I want to move. Now right click, and that will not undo, but it will stop this automatic movement. So now you can see character 1 and character 2 exist separately, but they are perfectly aligned with one another. So what I want to do is go to this second character, and you're free to rename this. Like let's just say character 2. And notice that it only has, like this little triangle shape, it only has 2 things attached to it rather than 196. And this is what you want. You don't want everything to be moved over, just the pieces that are being used. You click here and then go into pose mode. Now you are moving the second character. And then you can go here. And hey, it probably still remembers when I did a paste flipped pose. All right, now we have, she's in a flipped pose over to the other side. Remember that you don't want to be moving in object mode. Like if you're moving things when they're orange, that's bad when you're making game assets, because you want things to always be at the origin. And if anything is deviating from the origin, you want that to be done from the root bone in the rig. So that's why I'm using this little cube here in pose mode. So anyway, moving her to the other side, now I can go back to this character and say that I want to change her outfit to something else. So you can either click through everything, the full complete hierarchy like this, or you can go and make it a little easier and go into shading like we were doing before, because I set this up to have filters to make things a little bit easier. So let's say I wanted her to look like, well, I mean, I could just scroll through and try to get ideas. Let's make her look like form 10. Instead of form 5. So disable 5. And when we go back, you can see that something is a little wonky because the masking on the skin is still using the masking that was utilized by this form on the right. So what you want to do is you click here, go into the shading, and just to make sure you're clicking on the right thing, you can turn the overlay on, make sure that's that outline. And we're now changing this material, and you want to go from alpha mask and go to the 10 alpha mask. And that will restore it to what is supposed to be visible with that character. So now you have them both in the scene together. And let's say that you wanted both of them, you want to pose them both at the same time to make them interact a little bit. So now you can click on one rig and then shift click to the other rig and then go into pose mode. And then remember, this is attached to the right hand. Remember, I left symmetry on, don't want that. So now, let's put, you can reset that. Put the hand back down here. And I'm going to want elbow to be facing this way. And this is just how it was set up originally, but this big flap that's hanging off of the arm, like this is a form that wasn't actually used in the game, so I don't think it's fully finished. But you'll notice is that when you move the right hand around, that this big flap very rigidly moves with it. Like there are some cloth physics and stuff in the game, but it can be a little janky to deal with that. So let's just say you want this guy to be like handing this over. You're like, oh, this is for you. Then I can just go right over and click her hands. And she can be reaching over, and I'm going to when you push C, you can bring up a really quick and easy way to select a lot of stuff at once if you don't want to just like shift click everything. But C, click everything, and then I'm going to reset clear rotation, only rotation and not position. So her hand is still sitting here. Now I can move her hand out. Be like, she's reaching out like, oh, for me? The hands are so small in the way these characters are designed. And I'm going to reset everything for this also. Remember, the search menu, it remembers the last thing you did, so reset rotation. So the fingers are all flat again. Let's make her lean into this more. Really into it. Like, ah. And most of the time when I'm doing this, I'm looking at the left. I'm looking at what the final render result is going to look like, and not the scene where I'm doing the actual clicking on the right side. Don't forget the targets for the elbows and the knees. I mean, this doesn't need to be perfect. This is for demonstration purposes. Here's a quick example where you could use the 3D cursor, where you could put that point there, turn rotation into, or wait, no, pivot point to 3D cursor. So now when I move the hand, it's going to be relative to that. So you can do this kind of movement, whereas normally this would happen and the hand would stay stiff. Now I can rotate it relative, and sort of like a forward kinematics sort of way. Now I'll go back to median point. I don't know, something like this. I don't want to spend too much time. This video is already very, very long, as I thought it would be. So there you go. This is our beautiful pose with two characters, and they're together, and you can change the customization of either of them if you want to. And when we render this out, it's just going to look how it is on the left. And remember, it's going to be a transparent background so that you can put this, composite this into like Photoshop or anything else from that point on. All right, so speaking of rendering and compositing, let's export this out. So let's go back into object mode. You should always get into the habit that when you're not posing stuff, to be back in object mode. Like object mode is the highest, or no, I should say the lowest level. When you're not focusing on a single task, you should be in object mode because it's kind of the biggest picture, like macro view of the file. Because what would happen if you're in pose mode, you're trying to be like, well, I'm trying to add a cube to the scene. Why can't I add a cube? It's not working. It's because you're posing right now. You're supposed to be moving bones around. Object mode is the mode that you add objects in. So if I just wanted to add a cube, you only have to be in object mode to do that. And I'm just going to reset the cursor world origin. So if I wanted to export this, it's as simple as just going to render and render image. And because it's a still image, you're not going to see this because it's going to open a separate window. Clicking render image. And I remembered something I have to fix, which is good. This is a learning experience. I'll show you what happened. And this is the window that pops up. You're like, uh-oh, why the clothing is it not showing at all? It's just the two characters. And the reason for that is that when you look over at the hierarchy, notice how there's a little camera icon and an eyeball icon. The eyeball is just hide in viewport. The camera icon is disable in renders. So this was a big issue when I was initially setting up the file, and I had to individually hide everything because I was like, why, what's going on? But I made this very easy for you all. So we go to shading. Now remember that this shows you everything that is currently visible in the top, and all you simply need to do is click on all of these cameras. So now when you go back out to here and you click render image, everything shows up as expected. There. So here is our render. And if you want to save this, you will go to image and do save as, and it will just save it out like any ordinary file. But remember something that we did in the very beginning, because if I open this image right now, it's going to have a solid gray background, which can be hard to work with unless this is what you want. So I'm closing that. And remember how we disabled it before? So we're going to go to render, scroll down to film, and click transparent. Now you'll see the checker pattern in both views. So when I go render image, now there you go. Now it has a checker pattern. So when you save this out, and you're not going to be able to see this because it's going to open a prompt for like my computer, it's going to ask you what file type you want, and you want to save it as a PNG and save it as RGBA. The A stands for alpha, meaning preserve the transparency. And what's really cool about this is not only is it a cutout of the characters, but it's also going to be save the semi-transparency of the shadows on the ground. So if you were to find a completely different scene or something else that you want to put this image on, you can have the shadows accurately project themselves semi-transparently on top of whatever's there. So that's why I like this feature so much. But I disable it because it's a little hard on the eyes to have that on there all the time. The last little thing that I want to show regarding this kind of pipeline of just innate toggling stuff, posing stuff, and just using all the pre-existing assets is this final little workspace that's called compositing. Now this is going to be a little intimidating, and luckily you don't have to mess with any of this. Most people never actually touch any of this ever. But so what this is doing is it's going to overlay some stuff before it does the final render. So like you could have a whole bunch of different they're called what is it called? View layers. A view layer is a single product of a scene. You don't have to understand any of this. I'm just trying to give some explanation. So I have multiple view layers in this file. Main view layer is where you do like 99% of your work, and then these other ones that I added are background textures. So if you were following the Discord, the Might and Delight Discord, you will notice that I had a bunch of these characters that were inside the paper cutout kind of texture that was in the game. So I set this up to be very efficient. So right now, the composition for blank is set up, meaning it's just going to be a transparent background. But if I want to do vertical, comp paper vertical, now I have this set up so that it's going to automatically composite these two images with this background texture on it. So now, unfortunately, you're not going to see the background over here. But when you go to render image, now you'll see it automatically puts that little background thing in there. And I just noticed it's a little out of alignment. Actually, I know how to fix this. One sec. I realized that the camera... I think this is supposed to be 0. Oh, no. What did I use originally? Well, I think it's supposed to be like this. Now, when I do render image, there we go. Now you can see that they are sitting on top of the scene, like one of the panels in the UI of Book of Travels. And I even set it up so that it automatically masks out, oh wait, you can't see this. It automatically masks out anything that tries to leave the scene. So that it keeps it in here. So for example, what if I wanted a character to intentionally be out of frame? So I'll like, I don't know, make him be like over here for some reason, just ruin the composition real quick. Is not what I wanted to do. Control Z, everybody. I'll just make it be over here. Now, when I render this out, you'll see that it automatically crops right on the edge so that, you know, it's not leaking outside of the little UI panel. And you can technically go in here and change this to a horizontal one. Like if you go to composition, or compositing, sorry. Put this into horizontal. Now this is going to be a little confusing at first. Horizontal. And I'll have to go up here into the render settings and change the output, because right now it's 1024 by 768, which is vertical. Well, 768 by 1024, which is vertical. And I'll have to change it to 1024 by 768. So now it's going to be horizontal composition. So let's move both of these folks back into frame. Actually, wait, no, let's move them really close. Like, what if you want them to be a little under like this? And this, I might have to fix this because I realize there might be a problem with it. Let's just see what happens. There's a render image. Okay, you can see it's partially working. I'll fix this in the file before I upload it, but I think I need to fix the composition. So let's set it for horizontal. This for V and then H. Huh. Well, here you're getting some real-time troubleshooting. I think it's going to be horizontal composition. Oh, that's what I had to do. Go back into view layer. Now go into compositing. Yes! Wow, I feel really smart right now, you guys. Okay, render image. Now we have the horizontal composition. Oh, you can't see it? Let me bring it up. So now, it looks that way. I mean, you probably don't really need to mess with it if you don't want to. I'll have this fixed in the file before you guys see this, because I'm making this video before I release this. Alright, but I'm going to put everything back to how it was, because generally I like doing stuff vertically, but you know, this is going to be up to you, and this is all just Blender stuff at this point, not really Book of Travels specific. I don't want to get into too much about just Blender stuff, even though I already have a lot of. So I'm putting this back to blank. Blank, everything should be back to normal. Right. Now keep in mind, when you are moving the camera, or actually let me turn the film thing off again, so you're not getting checkerboards. When you're moving this on the left, you're actually moving the camera. You see this over here? Oops, I'm in pose mode. That is what we're seeing on the left. So anytime you move this, you're actually moving the camera. So things can get a little wonky if you move it too much. I mean, you're free to like do whatever kind of shot you want, but I have it set up to have a really, really super zoomed in field of view to try to recreate the very flat perspective that Book of Travels has. So it's set up pretty precisely to match generally how the game looks. But I mean, you can add your own camera or anything, and if you want to make this stop moving, you can push N and then camera to view, and then you can like take it out of here. But I mean, then what's the point of having two viewports if it's not already one? Because you can just do all those kinds of movements here. And then let's just say I want to put these back into their normal standing positions. So in the middle of recording for this video, I managed to integrate some new features, and I wanted to slip it into this bigger video. And that's regarding the sun and how light is projected into the scene, and also the camera, and made it a little bit easier to use the camera. So the first thing is for the lights, and then you're just going to go over here to the scene, and I have a daytime sun and a nighttime sun. The only reason it's called sun is because it's a sun style light, meaning that it does not have a specific origin where light emits from it. It's just that whatever angle that these sources are facing, it just emits light evenly all around in that direction, a lot like a sun does. So in the most basic form, if you want to use one or the other, you're just going to hide one and then turn the other one on. So the moonlight, I guess, is, you know, just more of a bluish tone, but it's softer colors and everything. And then the sun is a lot more higher contrast. And if you want to remove the shadows entirely, you can go down here to the little light bulb here at the tab and then click it and then just remove shadows. If for some reason you don't want any shading at all, you can do that. There's still going to be a little bit of flat shading going on, just because of the way that the shader works. This is more of like an outlining stylistic thing, but if you want actual shadows, which I think look really nice, you can keep the box checked right here. And if you really want to, you can also change the color to anything else that you would like. You probably aren't going to get very good results for messing with the strength or exposure. I especially tuned the shader the toon shader kind of thing to take advantage of these as much as it can. I mean, you can try lowering the strength, but things are going to start to look a little glitchy and unintended, so I really wouldn't think of this as a traditional light source in that way. I would more just mess with the shader itself on the textures by going into shading, clicking on the thing, and then messing with these. If you really want to change how some of the light sources work, you can choose like how intense the shadows are on the clothing, and you can also change like the base lighting conditions and the multiplier of the light. So if we go into shading, that's one method of messing with the lighting conditions. But then the other thing that's really important that you're going to want to know how to do is change the direction that the sun comes from. Now, the easiest way is just going to be to click on this little yellow dot and then just move it around. That will change the direction that it projects. Very easy to do, but if you want a little more control, you can use rotate it like this. So this way you're just rotating locked to a certain axis. We do it global rotation as well. So you can go that way, or if you want even more precise rotation, you can go over here and you can, to reset this, click and drag all the way down and then type 0, which reminds me, I should turn keys on. This always resets itself, it's really annoying. But this is the item tab where it shows the stats, the transform related stats about everything with location, rotation, and scale. So right now the sun, you can see the yellow dot is facing directly down, like high noon. And then if you are rotating this, and I always like to do things in clean increments by holding Control. So I always start by going this way a little bit, and then let's go this way. So this way you have really kind of mathematical control, and you can see that the degrees that are changing here are going in even increments. So it's a good way to have a lot of control over exactly where it is. But as you can see, the location of this light source does not matter at all, because that's just how a sun resource works, or a sun light source works, is that it's all based on the angle that it faces more than anything else. And this all works the same for the moon version as well. And if you don't want the big shadow on the ground, this is something that's called a shadow catcher. It's just a giant plane that actually uses the same shader as all the other light sources, but it uses the shadow as like a mask, and it's transparent, so that way when you export something with alpha transparency, that the shadow takes into account the transparency and it becomes semi-transparent. It can be overlaid onto anything else. So in general, it's a really nice thing to have, but you can disable it if you want. And also this little arrow that's next to everything here, this controls your ability to select stuff, because normally you would continuously click on this shadow catcher all the time and it would get very annoying. So by clicking this, no matter how many times I click, I can't accidentally click it. So this is a very useful thing to have. But then the next thing here is going to be the camera, and I actually added this after recording the main video, so there's going to be a bit of a time jump in the progression of the video as you're watching it right now. But so you can see that there's this little sphere that says camera target that's floating in the middle of everything. So this is exactly as it sounds. It is where the camera is facing. And the camera, I'm talking about like the render camera here on the side. So if you want the camera to focus on any one particular place, like right now it's going to focus on this coroner guard, his chest area, and you can move it up. Let's say you want it to be like around his head. So you kind of move it this way, and then you are free to rotate around it, and you'll see that the camera is now focused on that spot. And this is a much more efficient way to control the camera than trying to just move the camera itself. Do that, and you can also scale this camera, because what it's doing is that the actual camera object itself is this thing over here, but you cannot click this, and I would not try to select this individually. You should only be moving everything relative to its target, so that way you don't have like two things that are conflicting one another, that you're only controlling the target and the camera is just reacting to that. And I have the camera very specially set up to maximize the the crispness of all of the shadows. It's kind of hard to explain, but it has to do with like a clipping plane and all of this, because the Eevee render engine works relative to the position of the camera for certain details. So I just really, unless you really know what you're doing, I would not mess with the actual camera itself, and that's why I have it set to be unselectable at the moment. So I only mess with the camera through the target camera, or camera target. And if you want it to go further away, if you do S for scale, this will actually move it further away and closer. So you can get kind of an interesting effect if you pull really far away by scaling it. Like if I angle this just right, you can see how it's working. As I scale this, the camera is technically getting far away, but then after you move it, you can move this around to pull the camera back in closer. So it's actually doing like a more shallow, what's it called, focal length or something like that. So you get some really interesting effects through all of this. So if you want like a very close portrait shot, you can do this kind of thing. Then if we wanted to, you know, rotate around, you can use the axes or also click the transparent sphere. It's going to get a little janky when it's not aligned to something, but you can kind of move it around this way. Here we go. So let's say we want this kind of a portrait instead of the full body being in the shot. So now if I were to re-enable the transparent alpha background by going down here to film, clicking transparent, so all the checker boxes appear so that the compositor can work efficiently and overlay the paper and the mask into the background. Now I'm going to go here to render image, and then for you to see this, I have to change this. All right, so here we go. I got this to capture a little bit better, but here's the result of the render. You can see that it is now it's cropped into the background. It's kind of an unusual way. It's not really meant to be fully cropped out on the edges like this, but if you really wanted to, you could import your own kind of matte for doing the cropping in the background, or you could go into here and go to the compositing, go over here and then change this to blank, so that you can get a preview at the top that it's going to be exporting without any sort of cropping in the background, so that when you go here and render image again, you're just going to get the, oh no, this is looking weird. So now when you export everything, you can see that it does not have the paper background, and then you can, but it has alpha transparency, so you could save this out and save it as RGBA to preserve the transparency in the background, and you could do any kind of overlay stuff yourself. All right, so the final part of this video, I promise, the final part is customization. And this is the actual modding stuff, I suppose. Everything that we did up to this point is just essentially kit bashing, or just looking at stuff that's already in the game that the Might and Delight produced, and using Blender to pose them and do whatever you want with them. Now, this is where we're going to get into actually making your own custom stuff. Now, this isn't going to be comprehensive by any means. I just want to give you guys an idea of where you would start. And I wanted this to be its own whole section, because I think most people are probably just going to want to skip to this part. But first and foremost, I would try to keep everything into the custom collection that I have right here. I mean, you can use whatever your own structure and everything, but this way, anything that you want to make changes to, it can all be stored in here, which makes it easy to separate your stuff from all of the pre-made things. So let's say that you wanted to just change a texture. So you're not changing a 3D shape, you just want to change the 2D texture that is on top of an outfit. So you can go over to here and let's just do how about, think of one that would be like yeah, let's change this one. So we have that enabled, but what you don't want to do is to modify the original one. Now this is a Blender file, so you're not literally like changing the game or anything. Everything's already pulled out of the game. This file has nothing to do with the actual game's assets. What you want to do is to modify a duplicate of this one. So in order to duplicate this outfit, you're going to have to, well, there's a few different ways to do this. Like, just for your information, if you wanted to find where this exists in the divided up collections panel over here, you would push number pad period, which is what we were doing earlier to focus the camera on certain things. Like if you're saying that I want to focus over by the head, and everything like orbits around the head, or I want to focus on the hand. Oh, let me turn the screen thing back on again. I forgot about this. So let's say I want to focus over here, and I'm pushing number pad period to do this. Now you're going to use that same button if you want to find where an item exists in a very complicated file. So you'll see I pushed it, and it automatically opened up the clothing torso collection, and it found this file right here. Now you can duplicate by either like typing it in, be like duplicate, or you can do Shift D. But in this case, you're going to duplicate object, and you're not going to do duplicate linked. I know earlier when we were making multiple characters in the scene, we used duplicate linked, and that's just because we want everything to still be, to have like a connection, so that if you update one thing, it'll update other things. But in this case, we want this to be its own unique thing because we're going to change it and we don't want to affect the original. So you duplicate this, and it'll automatically want you to move it somewhere, but if you right click, it'll cancel out that movement, but it's still duplicated. You can see over here that it says 0.001. This is your duplicate that you're going to now modify. Now, there's a few different ways to do this, but we want to put this into our own separate folder just to keep things clean. You can either click and just drag it all the way down and go custom, or if you want to be really efficient, you can push M or move to collection, or you can type move to collection. I've never actually done it this way before. Is this move to new collection? I think, yeah, this top one probably does the same thing, but pardon me. And this is a shortcut to move something to a collection. So I want to move it to custom. And then that way it does the same thing of moving it all the way over there. So I'm going to disable the original, and then now I'm going to go back to my custom one. So now I can call this really anything I want. I mean, in the future, when we're actually bringing this stuff into the game, you might need to have a certain naming convention, but for right now, let's just say outfit custom, just to differentiate it from everything else. So if we're just going to start with texture. So go in the shading view, and we're going to notice that this is what its material looks like. Now this is one of the form outfits, so it has this kind of color changing stuff that's already built into it. But before you do that, this material is still linked to the original. So if I were to make changes to this, you would be changing the texture of the original still. So you want to make the material also a separate thing. So you do that just simply by clicking over on the original and then clicking new material. Now it's going to add this, and keep a close eye out for these 001s, because this is how you know you're editing the correct thing. Anytime you don't see that, it means you're editing the original, and you want to make sure that you're editing your own version. So let's just call this is like poor naming conventions, but like a material outfit, oops, custom one. So now this is its own separate thing that you're free to change without modifying the original. And to prove it, let's just say I want this to be, let Make this kind of like a pale blue. Something like that. And I think the last one is the hat. We'll just make this like a darker, maybe black now? Make it a darker brown or something like that. Also, let's just, for the sake of it, let's change the character's skin color. That's something I haven't really done yet. It's just, I don't know, lighter tone. And something you'll notice is that some of the hats and things, or some of the outfits, might be a little, ever so slightly out of alignment just because of the nature of how I had to put all this together. So also don't forget the mask. This was originally, so this was the Gleaner 14. But funny thing, it only hides a tiny bit of it, but I'm looking at how the Gleaner is represented in the game itself, and his head sticks through the hat in the original game files. So this is actually just a flaw with the thing. Hey, that'll be an unexpectedly interesting part of the tutorial. We can correct that for our custom outfit here. So anyway, we're just changing the materials. So in order to prove that this was, like, is its own separate thing now, actually, let's go back to here. 14. Here is the original, and there's our custom one that we're working on right now. So now there are two separate instances and you're not messing with the original. Alright, so you can do changes that are just as simple as the color if it has the splat map that is allowing for this sort of dynamic coloring to happen. But what if you want to actually just paint onto the texture like you normally would? So this is the base texture and everything is gray because of the color ability that's in there. But when you just look at this, it's going to be very confusing to know what is what. So this is where UV mapping comes into play here. So I clicked on the character. I mean, this might make more sense. Well, here, I'll turn on overlays for a second. When you click on this character and you go to edit mode, and then you go over here to the UV view, you now will see the mesh overlaid onto the texture, so you'll get an idea of what is what. And if you want to get a better sense of how these two things correlate with one another, you can turn on this thing that is called, I guess it's already on for some reason, it's called UV sync selection. So as you select things over here, like let's say faces, it'll select them here. So this is how you can figure out, like, okay, here's the bottom, front, and center. But what's to say, like, I have no idea what this is here. I can just click on that and be like, oh, that is apparently hair that was built into the character's design. Or, like, what's this? Okay, that is the front of it here, which actually that kind of makes sense because you can see the little like trim that is painted on it here. And you can do this for anything. And I'm pushing L, by the way, to do like a full, it's called a linked select. That's, you know, compared to just clicking like this, which, turn this on. So that's how you can figure out where that is, or if you're looking for a very specific thing, like because you can go in either view and edit these things. Like, okay, where are the vertices for this little section of the belt, but I don't want any of that. Like, okay, all of that is located right here. So if you want to export all of these files and work on them in Photoshop or Krita, I don't know how to pronounce it, or any of your other programs, you can, this is how you're going to export everything from here. If you just want this texture, you simply go up here to the little hamburger menu, they're called, do image, then save as, and then save it as a PNG, because notice that this does have alpha transparency in it and you want to preserve that. So be sure that you're saving as PNG. So you're not going to see the window that just showed up, so just trust me with this one. And I'm just naming the file my own conventions. I do TEX for texture, and let's do outfit 1, and I'm doing RGBA, saving as PNG. So I'm going to pause the video, and I'm just going to make a quick, Photoshop or GIMP change to the texture, and then I'll bring it back in to show the customization. All right, so in order to actually bring your own custom texture back into Blender and to use it on the model, you want to go here and add a new image texture. This has always been very confusing to me, and maybe someone can explain this, but it's always been kind of frustrating in Blender that when you're trying to replace already existing textures, like you think you would go here to open image and just swap it out, but instead it like replaces the data block of the original texture, which messes up all instances that use that one. So I wouldn't just go and click into here and replace what's already there. That's why I would go here and make a brand new node, so that everything is new, and you're just going to open the file and go find your, like there's a window showing my Explorer right now that you cannot see. Then I'll open that texture, and then now I'm going to connect it back to the original, both the alpha and the color, and you'll see up here that I added a kind of a plaid pattern to it that appears over there. And in order to get the views over here to update, you just have to click on a different node and then click back again, and it will automatically update. Or you can manually go over here to the menu and do image reload. So if you're constantly doing little iterations in your editing program and you already have everything connected like this, and you're making little slight changes to it, and then you save the file and you export it, and then you just go back into here and you reload, or you can just click back and forth to have it update to the newest version. And you should see it update up here as well. And a little tool that can be useful, that if you don't want to just be looking at this when you're editing the texture, if you want to have a little bit of guidance, that you can actually export the wireframe. Oh, let me hide. I forgot this was still open. You can export this wireframe over here as a transparent texture that can be brought into a photo editing program. So all you have to do is you click on the object and you go to edit mode so that you're seeing all of this. Don't actually mess with any of this or move any of it around. But then you're going to go up into the menus. Remember, you can scroll wheel click to move this around. Go to UV, and then go to export UV layout, and then be sure to export it as a transparent texture. So that way you will get you'll get just the wireframe that you can overlay as your own personal reference within the program, just to know where the boundaries of everything is. So that's also a very useful tool. A couple other details that might be useful to people wanting to do replacement textures is that generally I would not make a texture any higher resolution than 1024 by 1024. That was the highest that I ever saw for any full body things. The resolution of what textures are used usually varies depending on the complexity of the item, and a full body outfit is usually the highest resolution you'll go, and that tends to be 1024. Or 1K, as sometimes people call it. And if it'd be more efficient, but if it is a smaller thing that you're adding that doesn't need all of this resolution, to go down to like 512 or even 256. A lot of the weapons or things that just don't have as much surface area to cover with a texture oftentimes go all the way down to like 256, even if it's a very small thing. So now I'm going to cover just a very little bit about how you would change 3D model aspects of what you want to do here. And this kind of just gets down to just straight up just Blender skills. There really isn't anything that unique to what you would be doing here in a Book of Travels template. But just kind of an example of what would work is that I would definitely start by working off of an already existing thing, unless you really know what you're doing. So right now everything is very opened up over here. Okay, yeah. So like we copied this outfit over here earlier, we duplicated it, and then we renamed it, moved it into its own collection, just so that keeps it apart from everything else. So now you know that this thing that you're going to be editing is not going to be affecting any of the original things. So when you go into edit mode, this is, you know, when you do 3D modeling stuff, this still has all of the proper weights over here for how this should move, because all that I changed was the texture. If I go into here in pose mode, everything will still be working exactly as it should in the original thing. Whereas if you were to be bringing your own custom models in here, like let's say I wanted to add a cube to this character, and I was just like, it's already going to be using, it's like inheriting the material of the original one, but let's just add a cube here and say like, okay, I want this to, I don't know, just be attached right in the middle of this character, this hideous cube. And then, but you'll see that because I added this new thing and I go in here and try to pose it, that it's not going to move with anything else, and that's because it's not actually parented to anything. It is a part of this mesh. Its parent, that cube, is a technically part of the outfit, but it's not going to move with anything because it doesn't have the proper vertex group. So like even if I go in here, go to weight paint, and you click down here and you look at how all the other things are weighted to the armature or the skeleton or bones, or a lot of different words for it, how that cube doesn't change color at any point. It's because it doesn't know what bone it's supposed to be attached to. And there's two different ways to do this. You could just actually paint the cube from this view, like go to like hips or something and just say like, I want to attach this to the hip bone, and then just actually start clicking. But so it's very messy, and I'm messing with the weights on other things which you don't want to mess with. So you could actually mask the cube out by clicking this here. So now you can only affect the cube. So as you paint the weights for this here, it's not going to affect the surrounding things. Or what I would personally do for this simple of a shape is to just assign this using the UI in the vertex view over here. You can see there's weight, and right now it's set to 0.25, meaning that it's only influenced by the hip bone by this much if I were to assign this weight right here, but I want it to be fully influenced by it. So I just click and drag by the hip bone, and I will say assign. And you can see exactly what assign did by going back into weight paint, and you can see now when I click down all the different weights that red is 100% full influence by the hip bone. So now when we go back in here and we pose and try to move this around, you'll see that the cube now moves with the hip bone, and it's not going to be moving with anything else other than the hip. But that's where it gets more complicated, and why there's weighting, and you know, you can blend between different weights and do all kinds of stuff like that. So just keep in mind that if when you're adding new objects to a mesh, that you still need to weight them to the skeleton or the rig or whatever. And there's a million tutorials out there on YouTube about how to do all these other things, but I don't actually want this cube here, sorry, but I'm going to get rid of it. So let's just say I want to do a little more kit bashy kind of thing, and I just want to add more of these little things that are attached to this guy's belt. I can't remember, what is this supposed to be, like a marble block that's strapped to his belt or something? So a way to select a lot of stuff at once, especially when it's a separate object, is by pushing L, and this does a linked select. which will automatically select everything that's connected, because this object is not actually interconnected with anything else. So like if I do L on the main outfit, you see everything is interconnected here. But I just want to select these. So I just want to make a duplicate of these. And actually another thing that's kind of probably annoying right now is like you don't want to be seeing the skeleton back here as you're working with this. It kind of gets in the way. So you can go up to overlays and turn bones off. So that way things aren't getting in the way. And you can also turn extras off if you want. But just remember you did this and don't be afraid like, oh my god, I deleted the rig. Just remember that you disabled this. Anyway, I'm going to go here and select all of these pieces. I'm doing it at a vertex level right now. I think is everything. Yeah. So let's just say I want to add another one of these. So I will duplicate it. Oops. Let's realize that the screencast keys turn itself off again. So I'm duplicating it with Shift D, or you can open the search menu and do duplicate like that as well. Same thing. And remember we have the widgets up here for moving things around, so you could rotate it this way. This is probably going to be good enough. But, you know, remember all the other things that we learned about like using pivot points and different coordinate systems and using the 3D cursor and all that we talked about in the pose section about like different ways to make this look more easy to move around. So let's just add that. I mean, not going to be perfect with this. Let's just do one little extra thing to show you how you can use the 3D cursor, because now I can put the cursor there. And now it says move relative to 3D cursor, so now I can move it like this. I'll move it a little bit off to the side, and then we can get real fancy. And what if, instead of copying this over and having to manually rotate it again to make another one, what if I just go to the top view? Now you can push the numpad buttons here on the numpad to do orthographic, like flat on perspectives like this. It's a good way to get a non-perspective view of something if you're doing more precise movements. But I'm going to go directly above. I'm going to put the 3D cursor right here, and then I'm going to move this duplicate relative to the center of his body, so then it automatically rotates it how it should be moving all the way over to the other side. But it is clipping a little bit here, so I'm going to go back to normal clipping plane, and I'm going to use the arrows to precisely make it so it doesn't clip as much. And this is just all Blender stuff. I'm not going to go into too much detail about how to do all that. So because I just was duplicating already existing things, they should retain all of their weights. Meaning that these should all flex just how they did in the original model. Remember, we disabled this to make it easier to see. We'll go into pose mode. So when I move the character around, these will all still behave exactly how they did originally. And this might get a little goofy. I guess they do stretch. I mean, that's part of the original design, but characters usually aren't moving this much. So that's good if you're just duplicating parts. And another little thing, we can fix what the developer, like this is actually in the model in game right now that his head pokes through a little bit like this. So let's actually fix this and have our awesome mod that corrects the, I already forgot the name of this guy. Is this the Gleaner? It is the Gleaner. Let's fix the bump on the head here. Now, there's a million different ways that you could fix this. For me personally, I want to select all of these, pressing C to do this. I don't even know what this name is. I think it's called like cluster select or some cursor select. Selecting all the vertices at the top, and I'm just gonna make this a little bit more pointed. Oh, and I forgot one. Actually, it probably would have been better to just do this by face, so it would make more visual sense. And I'm just going to move this up So now he's not poking through. Cool. What other little changes could we do? I don't know, could like make this longer? And remember I mentioned earlier that Book of Travels uses a double-sided shader, because normally 3D modelers would be looking at this and being like, oh, this must be like a double-sided thing, because like when you go into here and you turn off back faces, normally in games these back faces are going to be invisible and you're not going to see the side, but I recreated how Book of Travels works and they use a double-sided shader so you don't have to worry about back faces. So let's just say, I don't know, I want to extend this. So there's a shortcut that I use all the time is Alt, Shift, and click, and it will select an edge loop, so all the concurrent ones. So you could have just like gone through and selected or do a lot of labor and just manually click, but if things are made well with good edge flow, you can just Alt, Shift, click, and it goes all the way along. And now you might be like, well, it's going to be kind of annoying to extend this down because it's going to just stretch everything and look bad. You could be like, okay, well, I'll do that, and then I'll, I don't know, I'll select the rest of it or something, but you can be intelligent here and use something that's called proportional editing, which this means that every movement that you do is going to be influenced by a curve to all the nearby things. And by default, so I turn it on, when it's blue, it's enabled. It's going to have way too much influence. If you look on the left there, you see this is moving his whole outfit around. And we don't want that. And we also don't want to be influencing things that are not connected. Like when I do L to link select, this is things that are all connected as one mesh. And I don't want to be affecting these things. So let's go back to select this loop here. And you can change the influence of this by changing this right here, but there's really no visual to what you're doing. So what the trick to do is to push G to start moving this and then scroll wheel to get a visual about how much you're stretching everything. So let's just say I want to make this a lot longer. Oops, and then I also want it to be connected only so that it's not affecting all the items on the belt and all of that. So now you can see it's not going to be affected by that. So it's just kind of, I don't know, stretch everything a lot longer. I don't know, something like that, I guess. The texture is getting stretched, which I mean, Fabric does do that. There is a really dangerous mode up here you can turn on called Correct Face Attribute, which means that it's going to, it's not going to stretch and it's just going to extend the UVs downward, but I would only use that if you really know what you're doing, because if you leave this on, you can just completely destroy, like watch this. Oops, oops. There. Like model ruined forever, and like good luck correcting this. So I would leave that off unless you're an advanced user. Alright, so anyway, I'm going to move all this down. And you can constrain this, like by, I start moving it and I push Z on the keyboard to be constrained to the Z axis and move this down a ways. And the scroll wheel to choose the influence of it. Let's move it down here. And then how about last little thing? Oh, let's just add a little bit of noise to this to make it not so smooth looking for whatever reason. So I'll select all of this again, but now as it moves, it's going to randomly change. It's going to like ruffle things up a bit. Maybe this isn't what we want. I don't know. This is just kind of... Okay, how about... what should we do? Let's do a good old-fashioned checker deselect. So this is where search comes in useful. Do checker deselect. Now it's going to deselect every other vertex, and we'll add a little bit of a ruffle to everything. So right now everything is going to have a median point, and I'll scale all of these inward so that it makes it like a little like crimped on the bottom like this. Actually, what if we do it outwards? Ooh, that's a nice flare. Okay. Then I could add a little bit of that up here too. I mean, this is going to be a little bit more complex to do. And also, if the texture is ever getting into the way from the model, remember you can change the view mode to go back to here so you can, you know, actually see what you're looking at. I'm going to hide the bones again. So let's just say I want to like do something similar to what we were doing over there, over here. But checker deselect isn't going to work quite as well in this case. Just kind of move that outwards like that. I mean, it's kind of hideous, but hey, I'm teaching you all, right? And then and that gizmo kind of gets annoying, so I'll disable that for temporarily. Go down here. Let's just click every other one manually. And of course it's an odd amount, so I think this will be fine. Then, I'm gonna move this over. Make it look a little spiky over there as well. I don't know. I mean, the only limit is your imagination in this case. So now, because we're just moving an already existing mesh that everything should retain its all of its weights. Well, it is going to get a little funky now that I think about it, because the skirt at the bottom is now longer than it's supposed to be. So it might get a little funky. But something I could do. Should I do this? This might be a little... Maybe I could rebake the weights. I mean, this is probably just going to be confusing to everyone here, but... So, okay, this is right leg, left leg, right up leg, right left. Okay. What if... Actually, I would have to research this a little bit. I was going to do an automatic re-weighting to fix this, but I think what would be a little more by code is just to manually weight this stuff. And you can actually, this is very useful, if you click the skeleton and the mesh and then do weight. I disabled it. Let me go back over here. Turn the extra bones back on. Do here to here, then go to weight paint. I believe Alt? Yes. If I hold Alt and click a bone, it will automatically select what it's currently weighted to. And now what's happened here is that this is now lower than it should be, so it's going to be influenced by the right leg. So I'd want to leave the weight at 1, but let's put strength down a ways. I'll turn symmetry on. It might not work. Symmetry is a little fickle at times. So now I can start telling it that the lower parts of the legs should be influenced because I, extended everything down. This is a very crude and messy way to do this for demonstration purposes. And it should be very gradient looking when you're working with fabrics. Like organic things should kind of blend together like this. Alright, so then I'm holding Alt and then clicking the other side. So we're gonna paint this side as well for the other leg. I'm making this video so much longer than it really needs to be, but I hope you're all learning something. I mean, there's also a whole lot of other things, like there's a whole thing like normalizing. There's just so many settings. Like Blender's one of these programs that there's more features in this program than you will ever use in your entire life. Even if you're a professional that uses the program daily, like there's still things that you'll just never use. Okay. Now I turn off the extra bones, go back into pose mode, and I'll try this out. And this should move a little better. See, now the lower leg is influencing where this should go. And a really cool thing, also don't forget about symmetry, so you can move these at the same time. Really nice thing is that you can pose a model, or put the model into a pose, and you can weight paint while they are posed. Actually, this weight paint doesn't look that bad. Like, it's kind of, I don't really need to correct anything, honestly, but I'll just show you as a hypothetical. Like, let's just say I really don't like how much, I don't want the back to crimple up into the back of the knee like this for some reason, even though I think that looks good, but for demonstration purposes, say I don't like that. So let's move it into a pose where this problem is prevalent. And now let's go do rig, hold shift, click the mesh, go to weight paint, and in the pose, you can influence it. So now we're gonna say, let's put weight down to 0. We're going to erase weights. And let's just say that I don't want this. Put the strength up a little bit. So now you can see the polygons are jumping around as I'm painting it here. So this is called weight painting. This is a thing that a lot of 3D artists really hate doing. So let's go to the other leg. And I'm going to remove influence, put the strength up higher. This is honestly making things look worse, but this is just demonstration purposes. I mean, you get the idea, is that you can put your character into a pose while you're weighting things to know how to better pose or how to get better weights. And everything's back. So I think that was a little bit of everything that I wanted to talk about for customizing 3D models. Now, I guess the last little thing I could say is, like I said at the beginning of the video, I don't blame you for missing stuff because this video is already way too long, but that we currently do not have a way to actually bring assets back into the game yet. But because it is a Unity game, and I've definitely seen Unity games bring custom assets in. I think it is possible, but the modding community is quite small right now, and we don't have a way to do it. But this template will help you get everything lined up just right and be able to look at a lot of references and just know what you need to do in order to actually make assets. And or you can just, make a render or something for yourself, just as fan art, use this as like a basis for painting over, or you can do a lot of things with all of this. But so if this were to actually be an asset that goes into the game, most likely what you would be doing is only exporting this mesh. Now, the few things that are important to make this function in the game, and I'm saying this just on experience with other games, I don't know as a fact that this is how it will be in BOT, but probably will be this, is that you want this to, its origin to be at 0. So be at the 0, 0, 0. So that little orange dot that you see right there, everything needs to have that origin. Like you see, every time I click something, it's always going to have that be its origin point. So like when I move this around, like this is really bad because its origin is now deviated from there, because game engines expect things to be at this origin. So whatever model you're making, be sure that that is where its origin is. And if you want to change it, when you hold right click and you move the 3D cursor around, you can say cursor to world origin, then you say set origin, and you can say origin to 3D cursor. So now, well, for example, let's say I wanted the origin to be out there for some reason. If I do origin to 3D cursor, it moves the orange dot out there. So now this entire model is relative to that, which would absolutely cause problems, but we don't want that. So we're going to move it back to here and then do cursor to, or origin to 3D cursor. So there's that. And you only want this file, this mesh, to be exported. So it should just look like this with nothing else, no rig, no body, nothing else in the whole file going into it. So a way that you can do this is that when you export the file, and you'd probably be exporting it as an FBX, is that there's an option that says export selected only, so that every time you would export, you'd click your one thing and then you would export it that way. And you most likely would have to be exporting all of your materials too. So if you were doing a lot of painting and doing adjustments here within Blender, you'd have to be sure to export out all of this stuff and have it all packaged as its own thing. So for example, like the splat map, if you didn't modify, you probably could use the one that already exists. I mean, to be safe, I would just do export my own, like, so you'd go here and then do save as, and then you'd bring it back in, call it like, you know, my custom outfit splat map or whatever. And then you have a separate one for your own texture, and you'd have all those textures separated into their own files and any other ones that you use. So you'd have the FBX and then the PNGs, and then most likely after that point you would probably have to bring it into Unity and turn it into a prefab, and then the prefab will be used in the mod or something like that, just to kind of get an idea of what you would end up doing to actually get your graphic, your art into the game. So if you made it this far into the video and you actually looks at the time, watched 3 or more hours or however long this took, thank you so much for giving me your time and spending time learning more about how we can mod the graphics of Book of Travels. And I also want to thank Might and Delight for giving us the blessing to mod their game and providing us a place to communicate in the Might and Delight Discord. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what people are able to do with the game into the future. I know personally for me, I want to go through and model a lot of items that don't have any 3D representation in the game, like use the inventory graphics, the really wonderful little illustrations they have, and create 3D models and textures out of them so that they can have some kind of representation. So maybe into the future, when we can customize things a bit more and can have, when you swap items out, they actually look different on your character. But either way, it's just a fun fan art little project, and I hope people can make use of this and learn a bit more about Blender, learn a bit more about art and 3D modeling, and just get a little bit of inspiration through using this file. And the file is linked in the description, and please let me know if that link is ever broken. And I'm also going to be linking everything over in the Might and Delight Discord. If you go over to the modding channel in there, and there's a forum, and I'm going to be posting a link to the file and this video over there. So if you have questions, you can ask about it there or in the comments of the video, and I'd be happy to answer them, because I love using Blender, and I love Book of Travels, and I love modeling and doing all such things. So I'm more than happy to help anyone out in this process. So thanks again to everyone for watching, for Might and Delight for making a wonderful little game and encouraging us to mod the game. So see you all later, and happy modding.